Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of Living on Borrowed Crime, Real Talk with true crime content creators. I'm very happy to have you guys here with us tonight in the audience, and certainly very happy to have once again a galaxy of true crime stars from around the world and YouTube. I'd like to introduce, first and foremost, Mr. Black of The Disturbing Truth. Good evening, Mr. Black.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to make this one and not miss it like last time.
Oh, I'm very glad, and no need to apologize. Life is life as it is. And secondly, we have Matt Orchard of Matt Orchard Crime and Society.
Hey, Scribe, thanks so much for having me again. Glad to be here.
Very excited to have you on for one of these, Matt. Next, my citrus from another mistress, Dave's Lemonade. Good evening, Dave.
Hoi. Thank you for having me.
Or morning as it is in Australia, I should say.
Yeah, 10 a.m.
And as well joining us are from the Misery Machine, Drewby and Yurgi. Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
Good evening, Scribe. Thanks for having us as always.
Note to everybody in the chat and elsewise listening in the future, Kamran from TruRed Crime was originally scheduled to be on tonight, but due to a last-minute scheduling conflict, he was unfortunately had to drop out. So I'm looking forward to having him on for a one-on-one interview in the near future, where perhaps we'll touch upon these subjects with him in a more, personal format. Okay, so before I begin, first at the top of the chat box, if you guys take a look, there are a couple of donation links up there as requested by a couple of my guests. From the Misery Machine, the Trinity Jubilee Center, and from Mr. Black, he wanted an organization that treats dogs well, and so I put the ASPCA up there. If you guys can take a look at those, donate if you are able, and even if you're not, if you can share those out on social media, that would be appreciated. Also, if you're not familiar with any of my guests for whatever reason, all of their particulars are in the description below, including Kamran's from TruRed Crime, in case you haven't heard of him. So take a look at those, their social medias, their Patreons, their YouTube channels, and so on. They're there for your perusal. Okay, so I've got a little bit of an introduction to do, and then I'm going to get out of the way of my guests because we have a lot to cover and a lot of topics to discuss. So for the sake of this episode, what I did was I read through several articles and a couple of academic journals. And from these, I derived what seemed to be, to me, the four most common objections or criticisms of true crime as a genre. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through each topic in turn. Everybody on the panel have an opportunity to speak their mind and discuss amongst themselves their thoughts on it. And then we'll move on to the next. In between each topic, if there are super chats from the audience with comments of your own or questions or insights otherwise, I'll read those as we go between topics. I'm setting a soft time limit of about 20 minutes per topic. And that's not to say, we might have less than 20 minutes of time to talk on any particular thing before we get tired of it. But if we stay within that framework, we should keep the broadcast within striking distance of about 2 hours, which should be good for everyone's consumption and hopefully good for every one of my guests' time zones and bedtimes. Now, here comes the disclaimer. Something I want to make very clear before we begin. While I am the host and moderator of this discussion, and while I am indeed the author of the text of the objections and criticisms, as you'll see them on the screen shortly, these are not my objections or criticisms of the true crime genre. If you can believe it, I'm actually a fan of the true crime genre, and I have my own opinions on these criticisms and critiques, but I'm going to refrain from giving my own commentary here, as the floor is to my guests tonight. One of the concerns I had, and Drewby can attest to this because he and I have been discussing how a show like this might be arranged for some months now offline, is that there's a danger here that this could come across as contentious or adversarial. And so just for everyone's edification, I am not here acting as a devil's advocate for the opposition. While I may make clarifying points at times or ask clarifying questions depending on the circumstances or offer up examples for the sake of discussion, I'm not an inquisitor. So just to make that clear. And now, of course, if my guests disagree with each other on certain things, that's perfectly fine. But that's my long-winded CYA disclaimer. And so with that, let's dig in for the sake of time and expediency. I'll keep the subject at hand at the bottom of the screen for everyone's reference as we go. But before I get to that, just to make sure I get these out of the way before they disappear off of my chat box, thank you to Kiever Den Mother, for the Dog Cat Fox. Thank you, Kiever Dam. Appreciate it very much. I hope you'll forgive me if I don't play a Dog Cat Fox stinger right now. And Derek LaRue, thank you as always for your continued support and generosity. Very much appreciate it. And I hope everyone enjoys the show. All right, so our first topic. And I have rewritten this several times, so it might appear slightly different from those that I sent you guys earlier on. But true crime presents itself as journalism, but has no professional imperative to adhere to those standards. And so we'll start by going around the circle. Mr. Black, you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think, for me personally, maybe it's just what I do when it comes to true crime. I think true crime is a broad spectrum of how you want to create it, how you want to do it. For me, I don't look at it as journalism. I'm not reading the news. I'm not just reporting unbiased information. For me, when I get involved in true crime, it's very much about storytelling more than journalism. And I want to stay on the side of the victims, and I want to completely level and bury the monsters that I talk about in those cases. So for me, it's nothing to do with journalism. I have a show I've started called Recently Criminal, where there's a little bit more journalism, but I do editorialize. I'm not unbiased. I never said I would be.
All right, Matt?
Yeah, I would second a lot of what Mr. Black says. The other thing is that, I mean, journalism itself is kind of a broad term. Like, what would I know it's a broad criticism you're presenting. It's not from a particular person who we can like pull up for clarifications, but in terms of like presenting itself as journalism, like in what sense? Just because yes, like we're definitely talking about things that actually happened. They're not fictional stories, but beyond, is that the standard for journalism? Just, you know, talking about anything that's kind of out in the big wide world. I mean, at the end of the day, I too would regard what I do more as storytelling, except using real life situations and things that actually happen to tell the stories around. Shit, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, and I mean, in terms of like how I do that, I do actually think I try to approach it ethically. Like I try and make sure I'm getting my facts all in order and I'm not saying anything that would mislead someone. And it's true that I don't have like an editor or anything that holds me to account on that. I just have to trust myself to be ethical, I guess. And I think I do my best at trying to do that. Maybe it would be good if I had an editor or if there was some kind of like larger body that oversaw things. But as we see in actual journalism out there, that those mechanisms don't necessarily themselves stop things that are wrong or things that are misleading or things that are unethical from falling through the cracks. Even with journalism, it tends to come down to the individual journalist at the end of the day, whether that's going to happen or not, and their ethics and their code of conduct, because sometimes the higher ups aren't going to catch you.
All right,
Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah. So when I was thinking about this question, I ended up looking up, you know, what is journalism? And a couple of descriptions that I found: the activity or profession of writing for newspapers, magazines, or news websites, or preparing news to be broadcast. Journalism is the production and distribution of reports on the interaction of events, facts, ideas, and people that are the news of the day and that inform society to at least some degree of accuracy. And then the other thing I looked up was, what are the standards of journalism? And a couple of things I found were truthfulness, accuracy, fact-based communication, objectivity, fairness. And there's this other thing, the 4 C's of journalism: clarity, context, coherence, and completeness. So I think the difficulty here is when people go for a career in journalism, you have to study for that. And there is ways that people embark on that life journey, and there's rules that they follow to present information. Like Matt said, he doesn't have an editor, and I feel like most journalists that work for a company would have an editor. So we are telling stories, as Mr. Black said, and I would put myself in that category as well of being a storyteller, but we are telling true stories. And a part of telling a true story is to be accurate, to be fair, to be complete. So I would argue that in a sense we are journalists, but have found ourselves in a position where we don't adhere to the same sort of rules and regulations of what governs journalism. I've got a lot of thoughts on this one, and I don't know how to put them all together. But I think ultimately, to try to summarize my thoughts on it, it is a tricky line that we walk, because each of us, we don't have a job interview to get this job. We just make a channel, we start telling our stories, and people begin to follow our channels. And they may follow us because they like the way that we report the facts, or they might like the personal touch. Yoshi likes that. They might like the personal touch that we put into the way that we present the stories. And I think that all of us here have found a level of success within that field. And it's, from what I've seen of everyone's channel here, it's because although we may have our own opinions in that, there is that level of truthfulness and accuracy within what we report. And if people were to do their own research on a case and dive into it, they would find that our videos are quite accurate to what happened. So I've kind of forgot the question, and I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but I do think that this is a form of journalism, but we're walking a new territory of not having to adhere to the same rules of it. I don't know if that answers the question. Actually, I got rambling there and I lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Whatever comes by, and we can circle back if you think of something else in the interim.
Yeah, no problem.
Jurgi, what are your thoughts?
Okay. So for one, I don't call myself a journalist. We never have. We never plan to. Druby and I really consider ourselves just to be two concerned citizens trying our best to make a difference in the true crime space. So when it comes to who's calling who a journalist, it's quite often the audience that's applying that label of journalist to true crime YouTubers and podcasters, not the actual creator. A lot of this I feel is like based purely off assumptions, because not only do creators get that journalist label, oftentimes people assume we're private detectives or have some background in law enforcement. And this is something that we have to correct people on fairly regularly. I have a lot of people who contact me privately wanting me to find their lost relative. I try my best, but that's not the background that I have. So, for us, we're simply researching the case, compiling the information into an easily digestible story for the audience, and hope to keep the victim's name alive and spread awareness on it. Honestly, if we're going to talk about journalistic standards and who's actually not adhering and who's exploiting, Druby can touch on this a little bit more because I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, but we have a specific example.
You talking about the Adrian Jones example?
I sure am.
All right. Well, with that, Druby.
So this was something that I wrote like 2 pages on this in preparation, and I'm probably not going to read most of it because it would take up this entire session. But first and foremost, I don't consider us journalists, as Jurgi said, and every person that is a true crime podcaster or is a true crime YouTuber, the majority, if not all of them, unless they have a background in journalism, I've never heard any of them call themselves journalists. Now, I think the bigger argument is what we do journalism. I'm not about to sit here and say one way or the other, but I view journalists as people who break news. In general, we don't break news. I can count on one hand the times we did break news, but it was always for local cases and involved us finding people and reaching out for a comment. On the topic of people who work for newspapers, one of my good friends worked for the local paper around here, the third biggest paper in Maine, for 10 years. And I asked him what burden was he holding himself highest to, and he said it was accuracy, which that's what you would hope you would hear, right? As my cat destroys my blinds. I don't know if you can see him. But he had an editor. Their newspapers have the budget to have something like that. Most true crime YouTubers and podcasters have small teams or no team at all. So it's kind of up to them to make sure they follow the ethics of journalism. And I feel like in the past 5 years or so, many of us do. I feel there's been a pressure from the community, rightly so, and I can touch on this later in some of the other questions, because I feel like true crime has radically changed in the past few years. But there's been this push to maintain the ethics of journalism. And I think the first and foremost one, and my friend agreed for whatever that's worth, is maintaining the highest level of accuracy possible. And when we tell a victim's story, I want to make sure I get the right information and complete information. Can we corroborate this with multiple sources? Those things are important. But like what Jurgi said, what we do is we take what's already known, piece it out through many, many different sources, and put it into a cohesive package. You don't have to dig through so many sources and get fragmented information. You now have a timeline that will allow you to understand what happened in this case from beginning to end. All I can really speak on is journalism in America. But my understanding, freedom of press is extended to all individuals. So whether we're journalists or not, we all have those protections. Before I get too long-winded, let's talk about, I feel that people hold true crimers to higher standards than they do the news. The news, something can happen and they put a blurb in an article, and all is well and good. I'm speaking generally, of course, because there's exceptions, but in general, people don't hold the news in the same way. And I've learned over the years, when I see a news channel on YouTube not blurring bodies, showing names and minors, names and faces of minors. When we just did Marissa Kennedy, and I have the timestamp here. I don't know if how this will go to the rest of the viewers here, but when we were researching Marissa Kennedy's case, the local news just put her classmates on there with their names and their faces, and I was like, this is a surviving child that has nothing to do with this case. Like, we have to blur this. Like, ethically, morally, I feel like this child should not be seen. And of course, there's exceptions to that, but in general, a surviving child, I don't feel should be shown in that way. And I feel there's a lot of journalistic standards that would agree with me. The thing that Jurgi was referencing that was kind of an eye-opening thing for us. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. At the time, this was 2022. We had to blur faces of children or YouTube would turn our comments off. And now I say blur faces of children, I mean faces of children who have since passed. Now, normally, especially when working with a victim's family, they want you to show their family member at the highest point of their life. Try to remember them in a positive light. Well, YouTube did not like that. Things have since changed, thankfully, but at the time, if we did not blur faces of children, YouTube would turn our comments off and not show our videos to the bulk of our subscribers. So when we covered Adrian Jones, we blurred his face. There were many pictures out there of Adrian in torture positions, showing Adrian wounded, Adrian without any clothes on, and the latter especially shocked me. I remember saying, I don't know how this is not getting flagged by YouTube, but clearly I'm not going to show any of this. So the only pictures we used were Adrian when he was alive and well. So when I woke up one morning and saw that we had received a community guidelines warning, which is the first step of a YouTube strike system for endangering the welfare of children, somehow we were endangering the life of a boy who had died 5 years prior. So I took 2 hours to carefully word and craft an appeal. I provided sources proving that Adrian was no longer alive, and I also provided YouTube channels of major news outlets that had much worse of Adrian up, and they were somehow able to stay up. The biggest offender that I saw was 41 Action News. They are now known as KSHB 41. Within 5 minutes, my appeal for a 21-minute video was denied after I sent it, and they included a timestamp for the reason why they issued the strike. And that timestamp showed this picture with Adrian's face blurred. They considered, and this picture, this is probably the most well-known picture of the Adrian Jones case. I'm happy, smiling, unharmed, and somehow that was us endangering kids, whereas a news channel is able to put up things that are walking the lines of pornography, in my opinion, and not getting any flack for it. So you might be asking, why is a news channel able to show such horrific, unethical things, but our channel is not? Well, Susan Wojcicki, the then CEO of YouTube, spoke about wanting to push what she called authoritative content and limit non-authoritative content, or borderline content, as she called it. Her reasoning, and I'm paraphrasing, is that she wanted to protect against misinformation on the platform. And what better way to do that but increase the reach for corporate-backed news media and limit the reach for those that aren't. This is why a few years ago, many independent journalist channels and political channels were declaring that their analytics tanked overnight. And there have been people who theorize it's a conspiracy for major news to squash competition, but neither heads nor tails. There was a time in the mid to late 2010s where independent news channels would do insane numbers, video for video, going up against CNN or Fox News. And it's just not like that anymore. I think that when you look at something that we're doing, I can't speak for other platforms, but for YouTube, we are held to a much, much higher standard because we are not corporate-backed news media. And of course, we're going to get things wrong sometimes. But when we get things wrong, we do everything to try to make it right. And we try to do everything beforehand to make sure nothing is wrong. I mean, It's funny, like before we, while I was prepping for this, I noticed that, and they've since walked it back, but the Associated Press claimed that they were able to confirm that vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance had carnal relationships with a piece of furniture. You know, this is the Associated Press. Yeah. You know, they get things wrong too. So I think these things need to be taken into consideration when, because I think the elephant in the room is that the news media is this big ethical thing that doesn't make mistakes, but us true crime channels are just these grifty, unethical, immoral types of people.
Just to jump into, if you don't mind me jumping into what you're saying. Absolutely. There, you're 100% right. I mean, and most of the time when we do get something wrong, it's because of the abundance of amount of sources coming from these major news networks. Now, I personally work for one right now, so I kind of do half on the Disturbing Truth, and it's syndicated over through another news network. But I see this myself, and as I said, it's the sources that we pull our information from often that got it wrong. For instance, in the Lily Peters case, I jumped on that quick. Someone from the local town reached out to me. We're looking for this girl. Can you check out this case? So within 4 days, I had a video going, and someone was named in it. Another minor was named in it as a possible suspect. And I mentioned that he was named as a possible suspect, just like one of the news sources that I got from. And I was just bombarded by people telling me I needed to remove this. He had nothing to do with it, and he didn't. Of course he didn't. He really didn't. I still keep in contact with the kid. He's 18 now and doing well, got himself through therapy, stuff like that. But no one seemed to go after these news companies who were doing it. And I think the problem there is because there's no face. There's no one they can point the finger at and say, that face is to blame. I think that's a big part of it. So when it's just a web page done by KV8TNY WBC, you know, you can barely remember that name, let alone find a face to point your finger at.
I've been keeping an eye on the comments, and there was just one thing in here I thought was a good analogy. Janissa Rose writes, more like documentary film than news, which isn't necessarily a bad thing or less informative, just a different kind of information. But I think that format, like a documentary, is a very good thing to think of if you're applying it to the original question. Like, does a theatrically released, for instance, or a Netflix documentary have a professional imperative to adhere to the standards of journalism? Like, not formally, right? But it does have an audience. And I guess the argument would be it's sort of a self-regulating market. If you were to make a documentary on Netflix or release at the cinema or whatever, and it just had some absolutely egregious factual errors in it, or was just, you know, I know exploitive is sort of a subjective area, and we'll probably start talking about that at some point, but it was just egregiously exploitative. Like there was no debate to be had about it. Well, the flack they would get from the public and the sort of, you know, response they would get would sort of be the punishment. And I think avoiding that is the imperative. It's not really a formal structure like a newspaper.
All right.
Just one thing before we move on.
Oh, sure.
I think it's just a feeling. It's not. I don't really have any hard evidence to back this up, but I think one of the reasons, pardon me, that we cop so much flack when we get things wrong is because there's this it's a suspicion by some people who watch that we're all making tons of money off this. And so when you look at a news article written by a journalist that has gotten something wrong, well, whatever, you know, they're doing their job, right? They made a mistake. It's understandable. But when we do it, we are somehow, it seems as though we're making these large sums of money.
Yeah, Dave, real quick, you're stepping right into topic number 2, which is a great segue.
Go for it.
So if you'll forgive me, but just as a sort of overarching sum up to this, and just a question, this might add more time to it, but I was just curious. Do you guys think that it is a good faith mistake for audiences to at least assume that you are adhering to an ethical standard of reporting when you put out a video or a documentary?
I don't think it's.
I mean, maybe
No,
journalistic standards may be a bit high-minded and abstract, but audiences would not be. Again, like I say, it'd be reasonable for someone to think that putting something out there, you guys have done your due diligence.
Maybe to expect us to do our due diligence and to have researched things correctly and not been careless is one thing, but to compare us to a news network that they're not holding to the same standard because they're a high news network with no face, I think it's hard to say. Is that good faith? I think it's a bit of a double standard, to be honest.
Okay.
You should, I mean, I guess you should make the assumption based on the cut of the jib you get from whatever the organization is, right? Whether it's a news station or it's a YouTube channel or it's a newspaper, just name your medium, name your thing. But like, I absolutely think, I mean, I wouldn't want to get any of my information from someone I presume to be unethical, right? So
Right.
like me personally, when someone is watching my channel, should they believe that I, did my due diligence and I've tried to be as ethical as I possibly can in good faith in producing this? Yes, they should be, because that's the truth. I guess it's a matter of if having watched my videos, they come to think something else, I'm more than happy to hear why, and I could speak to that or whatever. But I would, what I'm saying is, I don't know whether someone should presume it going in just based off of my pretty mug or whatever, but I would absolutely make the assertion that my material has like ethical integrity behind it. Sure.
Okay.
I think this is hard for me to answer non-biased because going into this, starting this, at the time of when we started, there was a lot of sloppy true crime stuff out there. And like, I'm not like saying much judgment about that, because I mean, if people just want to react to what they see, like a news article, and give their thoughts on it, I think there's value in that. And I don't necessarily think that there's harm in that. However, I wanted to, and Jurgi too, wanted to make the point that we are going to do our due diligence. We are going to be ethical. We are going to be moral. We're going to try to get this right to the best of our abilities. So I feel like that's always been put forward with our channel. So I'm okay with people looking at me that way, but to hold that standard to everybody who turns on a camera and talks about true crime, I don't know how I feel about that. And so the point that I think that what Mr. Black was getting at, I think it's not good faith. It may even be bad faith for somebody to look at any of us and hold us to the same standard that you would a corporate backed news team. Like, I think that is a big expectation to have of just one single person or two people.
Yeah, well, corporate backed news these days doesn't have the best reputation to begin with. So
I can actually add more to that. Just recently with Recently Criminal, the first episode of Recently Criminal, I wore my typical what I wear, a black shirt and a black hat. And there were a few comments, one after each other, about how I looked like I just got out of bed and put a hat on and got in front of a camera. And of course that's exactly what I did. No, I'm joking. But it's nothing like what I did. You know, I wrote the whole episode. I searched the stories. I scripted it, put the script into the teleprompter. The whole set was built here in house, you know. Tom's dad, if you guys know Tom from Crimes Against Humanity, his dad built this set for me. So this is all original stuff we're doing here. So when someone comes on and says, and literally this was the comment, at least put on a collared shirt for sake, you know? And it was like, is that stopping me from being an ethical journalist? Is that all I need to do? I can get a collared shirt.
That's what it is. Get that shirt.
I put on the collar shirt and people have talked shit about that. Like, hey, you look like a blowhard. Like, stop trying too hard. I'm like, I just wanted to wear a collared shirt today. Thanks.
Yeah, they will, no matter what you got on.
Okay.
I think that part is definitely. I was just going to quickly say in terms of the dress, I think that part is definitely just a part of changing of era, changing of times. Like, you're going to see less and less collared shirts and more hoodies and caps and stuff like that as we just.
I'm going to take the shirt off.
Yeah.
That's a whole different show.
The new media landscape, right? That's just changing times.
Yeah, next we need a true crime hunks calendar or something. Anyway, transitioning to the next topic, before we get there, a super chat from Miranda Stone. Thank you so much, Miranda. It's very generous of you. She asked, Drewby, would you consider yourself an activist in a way? Does the word ever bother you when you need to step away into real life and shed the horrors you've encountered in your reporting?
The word, and that's a very good question. Thank you, Miranda. The word activist has never bothered me. I do consider myself an activist. I do consider the work that I do activism, but I feel like activism is a very general, like, broad word. I think that what we do, and even if a lot of other true crime people don't consider themselves activists, I believe that they are taking part in doing activism by raising awareness or calling attention to systemic issues that lead to, you know, why somebody might be murdered. One segment that we used to do, I'm trying to think how to word this. There is a word on YouTube that will get Scribe's video taken down potentially if I say it. It starts with an S, and it involves removing yourself from the earth. So
I usually say you've subtracted yourself from the equation of life.
Yorgi says self-checkout line and things like that.
Sure,
Like it's just like, so there is a month that commemorates awareness for that epidemic, and it always meant something. I consider myself a mental health advocate as well. It meant so much to me. So I could do one episode a week during that month covering cases where somebody subtracted themselves from life, and the factors, the circumstances that led up to that. Because I feel like in true crime, everybody wants to focus on murders. Nobody really wants to focus on that when people die that way. Like people aren't as interested as much. And I really felt that was necessary to bring to light, but now YouTube is like this. So I can't do that anymore. And that hurts me. Ever since we stopped 2 years ago, I hate that. But roundabout way, yes, I do consider myself an activist, and it doesn't bother me to step away and take a break from like what I expose myself to. I feel like everybody needs to do that, or else you just go crazy.
And again,
Ruby, you said that people are not as interested in that topic other than murder. Why do you think that is?
I think murder is more glamorous in a lot of ways. And I think that I think the true crime community is moving away from consuming things for glamour or appeal. I don't think that people or true crime creators are glorifying killers anymore, but I still think there's this thing of this one bad person decided to kill somebody else. And it's like, why did that happen? But people just don't seem to be asking a whole lot of questions when somebody does that to themselves, unless it was a really high profile person or a complicated situation, I hate saying this, the ones that seem to get the most attention where there's a conspiracy that, maybe he was murdered. And
well, I think that's, to be honest, I think that's kind of probably why you see that too, because if you have someone who's done that to themselves, there are a lot less questions to be asked in terms of who was responsible, and maybe why is still a big question, but a lot of times how is not as big a question. You know, there's something about, well, there's somebody still out there, or there was somebody still out there. I mean, you can see this when you watch. This is why Jim Can't Swim is such a big channel, because they break down step by step how they were caught and how they ended up, how what their responses were, their micro expressions in the interrogation room, and you don't get that out of a self-deletion case, you could say. So I do kind of understand where that is, but I appreciate that you would want to bring those cases to light, because that kind of awareness is big. It's something that's affected my family. I've seen it firsthand, and to be honest, we have a lot of questions still. But it doesn't revolve around whether or not somebody else did it. And I think that's where true crime, when it comes to murder cases, kind of takes over a little bit, because the idea of somebody, doing it to themselves versus somebody doing it to them is I think it's a little easier to understand, or maybe not understand. That's maybe a bad word, but it's almost like that's sad. That's terrible. Where if it's murder, you go, what? Why did they do that? Who was it? And who done it? That's kind of the best way I can describe it.
You have a clear villain that you can point a finger at and say, this is the person that is the bad guy.
Yeah. And again, I was trying to refrain from doing commentary myself, but usually in those instances, it's a situation where you could conceivably discover the motivation and the reasons why and wherefore, where oftentimes it's not necessarily clear or for public consumption why someone would do that to themselves. But another question here real quick before we move on. Miranda Stone, again, thank you, Miranda. It's very, very generous of you. Yurgi, I'm assuming this is some deep lore Yurgi here. Yurgi, do you think your final presentation on Peter Curtin in high school ever received the due it deserved?
No, because I didn't do a presentation on Peter Curtin.
That was, so I assume, Miranda, you read that off of a local newspaper. that we
Oh.
gave an interview to. I was the one that said that, and they attribute it to Yergi. So
Now, you
Oh.
see, that's exactly what we were talking about earlier, isn't it?
Oh,
The
journalistic standards.
news got it wrong.
and if
Oh
you
my
But holy shit.
if you search Misery Machine interview, you will find it. But the person that did that is a very, very good journalist. He just mixed up me and her, and I get a chuckle at it. Were you about to say something, Yergi, before I explain the story?
Yeah. So I did do a presentation on Lizzie Borden in 4th grade, and I got I did get the due diligence or attention I deserved as a 4th grader. So
It's a big topic for a 4th grader.
Yeah.
I
All
did
right.
Peter Curtin for my senior capstone English final. It was a presentation I had to give in front of the class. Peter Curtin, a famous German serial killer nicknamed the Dusseldorf Vampire. After giving that presentation and concluding it, there was silence, and one girl, this is a class of like 18 people, said, "Are you going to shoot up the school?" Like just like that. And I was like, no. And it just I that moment in time sticks out in my head because it shows me back then true crime was looked at this weird, like, underground kind of thing, this alt kind of community. And now, like, most of the people who listen to us are mothers and grandmothers. So times have really changed.
All right. Let's move on to the next topic. It was touched on peripherally by Dave, but we'll start it here. This is the second objection or critique. True crime profits off the misery of others without their consent. Let's start with Dave, since he was already kind of, and I realize this kind of also runs over into the idea that true crime is a high profit business on YouTube. So if you want to speak to that as well. But the common refrain that I read was this one in one form or another. So Dave, if you'd like to start.
Okay, yeah. This is a tough one, and I am very interested to hear everyone else in the panel how you respond to this, because it's something that I personally struggle with. So this criticism that has been put forward, it's a criticism that I put on myself. So it's not something that I hear it from, the odd comment here and there of people saying stuff like this, and it doesn't hold much weight to me when I read that. But my own inner critic has this criticism of myself quite a lot, where profit is a interesting word. I do this for a living. We do this for a living. So yeah, we profit. We do this to pay our bills. I don't know how well everyone else is doing, but for me, it's just a basic wage. And so that profit is not, if I were to go and get a job working like I did before this in the film industry or whatnot, the difference wouldn't be too big. But I get, sorry, these dogs are crazy. I get these thoughts sometimes when I'm working on a case where should I reach out to the family before making this video? Should I email them, find a way to email them, contact them on Facebook? Should I ask if it's okay to make this video? When the video is done, should I send it to them first to review? And I haven't done that yet. I haven't reached out to a victim or the victim's family before making a video. And I often think to myself, should I? So I can't really answer that question because I have such a high criticism of myself. That's why I'm so interested to hear everyone else.
Well,
All right.
I kind of I'd like to jump in on that last point because that's one of the interesting things about the question and the criticism. I agree with Dave. I think it's like an area I often think about, but let's start with that idea of reaching out to a victim. Now, all right, like let's say someone's sister was horribly murdered, and since she's become like a victim's advocate, like a public-facing victim's advocate. Well, of course, I just made that up, but I'm sure there's someone who like that. There's like a profile of people like that. Okay, in a situation like that, of course, reach out to them and go like, oh, hi, I'm making a video about Natalie or whatever, like, you know, because you know that they're in the quote unquote business of sharing their thoughts about that crime and the topic. But yeah, with you know, you're doing this without the consent. Well, for the average person, I would feel it would be actually more unethical than just going ahead and making the content than actually proactively making contact with people affected by it and drudging it up again and kind of forcing them to know, you know, something is being made about it. You know, on the other hand, I guess it would be nice to get, but you see what I mean? How it's kind of like you know, you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. You don't know if they would prefer to just be left alone or prefer to be asked for permission until you do it. You don't know what is actually to the preference of the victim. Going to the wider question though about, you know, profiting off of misery. I have thought about this a lot, and I've spoken to Dave about it too. The way I look at it, right? That criticism isn't really a criticism of YouTube true crime creators or podcasts or Netflix. It's basically a criticism of all of true crime, right? Like that would apply to any kind of content that's made about any violent crime that, you know, doesn't involve like direct collaboration with you know, victims and their families, which is, you know, 99.9% of all content you're going to see, you know, produced in this vein. So bearing that in mind, I would just ask the question, look, is there any reason to believe this industry, and that's what it is, it's an industry at the end of the day, right? Whether you like it or not. Is the industry going anywhere? Obviously the demand isn't going anywhere. So short of making a law that bans true crime, which in the US would be completely out because of 1A, in most other countries, some kind of equivalent, it's not reasonably going to happen. So given that's not going to happen and the industry isn't going anywhere, I think the only true ethical imperative for any true crime creator is to go, is the thing I'm making at any given moment doing its like good faith best to not lean into the worst things about our industry, and, you know, therefore pushing things in the wrong direction, and is it trying to, you know, essentially push things in the right direction by doing things as ethically and, you know, as respectfully as possible. And if you're doing your bit to push the industry in the right direction as opposed to the wrong direction, I think so long as you can honestly say that to yourself at the end of the day, answer that question in the affirmative, you should be able to sleep at night. I found that works for me.
That's
All right.
fair. I think that's very fair. Dave, to you, I'll put this to you. The fact that you question yourself on that repetitively is a really good sign. And I think that if you didn't, you'd probably be making a lot worse content when it comes to this genre. So it's a good thing to question yourself and second guess your morals and ethics when it comes to making this content. I certainly do. I find that the creators that lack emotion and compassion when making this stuff are the ones that make the content I detest. So everybody's got their own spin on things. Misery Machine, you guys are amazing. Dave, I've been watching you for years. I'm just getting to know yourself. I'll get deeper in there, but for me,
that's right. I don't watch true crime in my spare time, so you don't have to worry about doing that to be polite.
No, I will. I definitely will, though. For me, I do things a little different too, and it can be taken different ways, as you said yourself about respect, doing it respectfully. Well, I make intros and make things very cinematic, and I spend a lot of time on it. And most of the victims' families that I've done this stuff for have been very impressed and loved it. I'll also get comments from people saying it's disrespectful that I do that I'm treating it like a Netflix doc or whatever. But for me, it's about presentation. I need to present this story the best way that makes people remember it, because this is mainly what people want, is that their loved ones to be remembered and their story to be heard, you know. And if it's their loved one that's deceased, then that's part of their story, you know. So when you talk about profit off of the misery of others. That just tastes funny to me. Profit is a strong word. Do we profit? Yeah, we profit. Well, actually, we're reimbursed for the time that we put into the research and the development and production of these videos that we make. It's not easy. I'm sure Jurgi, Druby, I'm sure all of you guys have been in a position where you've shed tears during making a script or making the video. I certainly have. It's hard. I'm working on a case you guys did right now. Fallon, you guys know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it's just, you can't, I don't know how you could not feel things through this. And when people say, oh, you're just profiting off of, yeah, super, brilliant, amazing, guys, amazing. Cases like this and the baby Brianna case hit me hard. And people say, you're profiting off this case. I set up a petition to keep baby Brianna's father in prison. He's up for parole in the next couple of years. I set up a petition to keep him in prison. We are nearly at 40,000 signatures. A lot of us are trying to do something, and our time that we put into it, which is way more, Dave, sometimes than what you would do at a normal job, way more. There's 12-hour days here in this studio for sure, and we're slightly reimbursed for the time that we put in. And a lot of people don't realize that a lot of us also do put money towards the families. I've put money to families to help them get to court cases. I'm not going to name them. I can provide lists for you guys, receipts if you want, but I try to do as much as I can. So profiting off the misery of others is very hard to say. Now, there are other creators within the true crime genre that most certainly seem to be doing that, but I don't think any of those people are on this screen right now. There's two sides to everything. There's ethical true crime, and then there's people that really want to tell the story and do it right. And we have, we honor the victims in it as well. We try to be respectful, as you said, it's different. There's two different sides of it for sure.
People really like to discount the amount that we try to do. Again, let's come back to activism, donating money to GoFundMe's to get victims a headstone or for funeral stuff or anything like that. There's families that come to us and ask us to take on their loved one's story. That speaks directly to consent.
Big time. That's a big one, Druby. You're 100% right. I've easily got 300 emails, and I'm not doing this long. I've easily got 300 emails from families or people who knew victims asking me to cover their stories. And sometimes they will just continue to message you. A lot of my assets come from the families themselves. So 100% right. Good point.
So I wanted to, this is a very strongly worded prompt. True crime profits off the misery of others without their consent. When you hear that, that is really heavy. And I think it is something that no matter what you do, whether it's true crime or any sort of news, like say you are a journalist, anything that involves you reporting the facts, I think that this is a question you need to ask yourself. But as it pertains to what we do, I feel this is a question that's based on false assumptions and bad information. So let's first address the profit piece. Are there people that make money in the true crime space? Absolutely. But they're your Netflix, they're your news media outlets, your big documentaries. While it's not impossible on YouTube, it is a lot harder to do this. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If I was in this to make money, I would start a YouTube channel that was not true crime. I haven't done the math lately, but at one point, over 50% of our videos were demonetized. Critics of true crime like to look at big true crime docuseries and say, well, look at how much money this made. All true crimers must make serious money, but that's a false equivalence fallacy. The lunacy of people to suggest that money a big corporate media production makes is at all similar to a YouTuber is one of the most absurd criticisms. And most of these people have to
a YouTuber in true crime.
Exactly.
Like you said.
This would be like if someone was running a hot dog stand and somebody accused that hot dog stand vendor of making millions because Oscar Mayer makes millions selling them in supermarkets. A big documentary or a Netflix dramatization of a crime story is something very different from a true crime channel on YouTube. Not only do both have very different reach potentials and ways to monetize, but YouTube can straight up just flip a switch and decide that 100% of your ad revenue belongs to them now. It's two very different things. It doesn't take much digging to find out that your average YouTuber is working class. There's a lot of people on the internet who want to see working class people go down in flames, but give corporations a pass for the same things that they allege YouTubers do. Also, a YouTuber isn't actively trying to get money out of the viewer. Yes, some of us has Patreons. Those are completely voluntary. Some of us are like, hey, this is a fundraiser for the victim. Anything you can donate, like, we appreciate. But there is no paywall to view our material like Netflix has. The money we get when YouTube lets us is from big advertising budgets that want us to advertise with YouTube. We're not taking any money out of the pockets of viewers, but the critics talk about us as if we are. There was something that came up when I was talking to my friend who worked for the paper, and what he said was, I'll read it, with journalism, there's such pressure to rush shit out. Your editors want a story that is not only accurate and representative of good journalism, but is something that will sell newspapers too. The selling newspapers part is mostly unsaid, but you felt it every time there was an annual meeting and they talk about how much sales were down and needed to find a way to attract people back to the newspaper. Does this sound familiar to you? News media outlets are businesses that need to make sales. And how do they make sales? Headlines. You know, like, people have given news media a pass on this for decades. But YouTube, even covering their own costs, YouTubers covering their own costs, it's looked at as immoral. And people just don't realize, like, how often we're demonetized on top of that. Now, I think the more important thing to talk about is consent. I mentioned this before when we talked about ethical considerations, but if someone doesn't want us to cover their family member's case, it is not getting covered. There's multiple families who have openly said they don't want a case involving their family member covered, and we intentionally avoid those. And you know who's not going to do that? News outlets, major documentary productions, and the same people who criticize YouTubers will eat those productions up and give their attention or money to those productions. The Dahmer docuseries or documentary being the one that comes to my mind. I think Jurgi can talk about that a little bit more than me.
Yeah, I prepared a lot, so I'm gonna hop in. So like this, for me, it's like a really odd talking point because, like, oftentimes, like Druby said, a lot of true crime creators aren't even profiting that much. There's so many rules that we have to follow on the platforms, and it feels like you're walking on like landmines. Like I saw in the chat, people were getting all emotional about like how we have to reword saying the S word. Well, you have to, or your video is gone. You know, when you do make any sort of profit from this, a lot of people don't realize, like, we're not sitting in here like Scrooge swimming in money. There's contractors you have to pay for things like research and writing and editing if you don't keep that in-house. I know Druby and I, we are not good video editors. We have to pay a video editor. If you are a podcaster, you have to pay hosting fees. There's a lot of different things that fall under this umbrella. And a lot of times, especially if you're heavily demonetized, you don't even break even sometimes. A lot of times videos end up being a loss because, like, that's not even what it's about for us. We're trying to like do the right thing here and spread awareness and do this for the victims' families. On top of the fact that we do support different charities in our area and support victims' families. So much like Druby was saying, I prepared a lot about Netflix on this. So if we're going to talk about profiting without consent, look at your local newspaper, your news channels. If someone doesn't want to comment or they can't be reached for a comment, that news outlet's still going to report without consent, and it sways public opinion. So let's just say, I don't know, like something happened and I don't want to give a comment. Well, then by them saying that I don't want to give a comment, people are going to assume things. And that's your news people. So much like we were talking about, the prominent example that I can give is when Netflix put out the Jeffrey Dahmer story. Netflix intentionally cast Evan Peters in the role, knowing he would be turning Jeffrey Dahmer into a sex symbol. And that is exactly what happens. They literally glamorize that. Several family members of Dahmer's victims, who were mainly Black and gay men, spoke out against the series, stating that it re-traumatized them. They weren't asked, they were not brought in or anything like that. And Netflix did not care. They just wanted to push their trauma porn and rake the bucks in. So that series did over 1 billion views in under 60 days. And as of Q4 of 2022, the series was responsible for Netflix hitting $341 million in revenue. So until the detractors of true crime stop watching the news, stop buying their paper, and cancel all of their streaming services that include true crime content, I really don't want to hear their hypocrisy. I really
God
don't.
damn, Yergi. Yes, I agree. And
That's
you know
like,
what?
I don't know, like that's why it's controversial having me on these, because I don't really put up with people's shit.
No, I agree with you. We actually had after the Dahmer series, we actually had a girl in our Discord. She was a Patreon and everything, and she started romanticizing about Dahmer and about how he was just misunderstood, and it's really sad because he just needed to be loved. She was booted the fuck out of there quick. Not having any of that shit. You're not romanticizing a killer on my turf. That's my Discord.
Oh
You
my
don't get to
gosh.
do that.
You're-
It doesn't
you're-
happen.
you're
Look, I'll
jumping
tell you.
into yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll tell you another thing on this topic too. True crime profits off the misery of others without their consent. Well, you know who actually profits off the misery of others without their consent? I had a guy and girl. I think they were on Soft White Underbelly. They own serial killer and murder memorabilia, and they sell it. And they thought it would be great for the disturbing truth if I interviewed them. I never replied to them. Never. If they're watching, they can go on themselves because I really don't care. That's the most ridiculous thing. It's just like the people making the Dahmer shirts and wearing the Dahmer glasses and dressing up for him as Halloween. I have no time for that. 100% with you, Yergi.
Well, that kind of as well feeds into one of the later topics. I think is it the next one? It might be the next one. Yeah, actually it is. So you guys are just doing all the segues for me. I don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting here. Appreciate it. But before we get to that, let me, before I miss it here, get to some other comments from our viewers. Nova, thank you so much. It's very generous of you. Maybe some leeway is given, not saying warranted, to a news channel because a lot of them are reporting live versus true crime, where it's assumed that a creator has access to all info available, ignoring paywalled news, etc.
Then slow down and take your time to get it right. It's more important.
Right.
Yeah, live. I mean, I have some sympathy for that point, though. I mean, broadcast live, yeah, is one thing, but then also developing stories. And look, part of this, and like this isn't a total excuse for egregious errors or whatever, but you know, there are incentives, obviously, in the news industry to get the scoop, to be the first one to report it. And unfortunately, that's going to naturally lead to some situations where, you know, I'm not saying it's an excuse, but I've got some sympathy for the situation journalists are in, you know, where someone might just rush a little bit because they're so desperate and, you know, they just don't quite do the due diligence they needed to because they were really craving that big scoop. So I get it. And I can get, yeah, when people are, you know, are in less evergreen territory than we are, where, you know, hey, we're just telling a story. We can tell it any day and it'll be up there forever, and we can wait until all of the facts are in. You know, people who are, yeah, dealing with evolving, living stories, you know, yeah, have certain hazards that we maybe do not. So
they should maybe readdress it then. I mean, I've seen so many times where I have to screenshot pages sometimes when I'm doing a script, because when they get it wrong, they'll just remove the page. They don't come back out and say, "Oh, we got this wrong."
No correction.
But,
yeah.
You know, whereas we would get crucified for something like that.
Let's see. Another one from Miranda Stone. Miranda, I tell you what, I feel like I owe you something on top of everything else for your generosity tonight.
You're fired.
Yeah, I know. Miranda asks, Matt Orchard, with eyes full of gauze and shoes full of gravel, do you believe the cases you present haunt you more than the content consumers?
Well, it would depend on the case, I guess, but sometimes certainly there's some cases I've you know, I still take with me, I still think about. And you know, and there's others I put down. You know, I guess largely it depends on how tragic they are. But it also could depend on how resolved they are, if justice was actually done or not. But yeah, no, there's definitely some that still keep me up at night, for sure.
Okay. And then again, Miranda Stone. Oh, Miranda, queen of the discords. Mr. Black, your vid on bus 1170 is a favorite and a case that fascinated me. I often think about the dilemma that creators like you face when preparing a case that might have necessary but exploitive info on either perp or victim.
Hi, Miranda. Yeah, thanks for donating. I appreciate that. That's it's really going to help Lightscribe feed his children. He's got about 17 of them, so he's got to keep them well
I know of.
clothed and fed. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just the ones he knows of. That case, that case really stuck with me. And that case, yeah, you could say that the details that were divulged in my production of that case they could be considered exploitive, but I think those details had to come out because of the result of that case where Lee was freed. He was freed and let out after, cannibalizing a man on a bus in front of everybody. He was let out. I think it was 4 or 5 years later. So he's free walking around, and you don't get the full swing of you don't feel the gravity of the situation if you don't know what this man did. So once you know the details of what he did to Tim, you look at Lee and you go, whoa, hold on a second. They let him out. They just said, he's crazy.
This was the Greyhound bus one from like 10 years ago?
That's right. In Canada.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, that was a horrifying story.
Yeah, there was another one in England. Peter.
Is this the Tim McLean one?
Yes, Tim McLean. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. And if you don't know what he did, if you skip over the parts of the stuff that he did, that horrible stuff he did, then you might find it easier to forgive Lee and think, well, it's fine. He just, he had a moment of schizophrenia, and no, this guy premeditated it. He was thinking about it for days. There's proof of that. This can't be forgiven. And even look, I'm not someone who says that people can't be crazy, and there's a difference between someone who's genuinely psychotically crazy and someone who just does it because they're an evil bastard, right? If you're genuinely psychotically crazy and you ate a guy on a bus, okay, let's put him in a secure hospital, but he never gets out. That's my take on it. And the only way I can make that point is to tell you exactly what he did, So the fact this guy got out in a few years just pisses me off. So the details could be considered a little exploitive, but I think it was for a purpose.
Hey, can I just say something tangential to that? It's sort of, it kind of like segues into a general question of ethics and how we view certain cases and why. I sometimes think about Mark David Chapman, who shot John Lennon. I don't know if he's still alive, right? But he's locked up. Someone can look that up for me. I don't know if Mark David Chapman passed or not. But I've often wondered, like, if he had just killed an average Joe citizen under the exact same circumstances, clearly out of his mind, right? Buying like a copy of Catcher in the Rye every single day, et cetera, et cetera. I wonder if, he likely would have been, released for, similar to Reagan's would-be assassin, but didn't kill him, right? I wonder if he would have been out if he just didn't happen to kill a beloved musician.
Mark David Chapman is still alive and has been denied 13 parole hearings.
There you go.
He's 69 years old.
Okay.
So I wonder if we sometimes treat certain crimes different just based on who the victim is. Sorry, that's all I was trying to say. Yeah.
Well, I think it's based on the completion of the crime as well. If you foiled someone's plan, that's a significantly a less crime. This kind of situation can be seen in interrogation rooms. That's why cops lie to the people they're interrogating. When a victim's dead and the suspect doesn't know it, they'll say they're still alive because it's a much lesser charge. So we probably look at these kind of cases that you're talking about in a similar way. There was a case, I think, in England where a lady decided she was just going to cut the throat of a child. This is recently. This is in the past couple of years. She decided she was just going to cut the throat of a child in a park, and she did it. And I think she's being treated as insane. But had she not been able to do it, we wouldn't be talking about the case, So, the gravity significantly intensifies whenever the completion of the crime has occurred. So, for sure.
All right. So topic number 3, and it's been touched on a little bit already, but to get more direct to it, True crime glorifies the actions and or raises the pop culture stature of criminals. And I think this is meant to mean inherently does so. Let's start with Matt this time.
Well, I mean, someone can try and falsify the second part of that if they want, but I believe that second part is pretty much beyond question, right? True crime definitely raises the pop culture status of or stature of criminals. Whether it actually glorifies them, I think that's creator to creator. But hey, every video you make about Scott Peterson just became higher profile. I don't know if he appreciates the publicity, but he certainly does get a higher profile. In terms of like glorifying actions, I mean, I don't know what more I can say other than that really is a creator to creator, documentary to documentary. You know, we've been talking about Netflix a lot. I'm not necessarily gonna, I mean, I think some Netflix docos are great, you know? So I'm not, whenever I make the comparison, I'm not trying to make it in a negative sense, but there might be a doco on Netflix that I think is outrageous and really glorifies a person. You were talking about Dharma before. I haven't actually seen it, but just taking your word for it, we could say that. But there might be another Netflix doco that I think really gets it right. Basically, I think it comes down to it's a taste thing, and there are some things that are, you know, so tasteless it actually does kind of become, it may as well be objective. But usually it's subjective, and I think you just got to do your level-headed, good faith best to stay on the right side of that aisle. Is about as much as I can say to that area.
I think to add to Matt's point, and this is something I hadn't considered before, that if you say a perpetrator's name, and I don't think any of us do content that glorifies the perpetrator whatsoever, but if we name them, then in some way, shape, or form, it does raise their status a little bit. Now, when people come and talk to us about cases we've done in the past, they almost always say the name of the victim to mention that case compared to the name of the perpetrator. I think that's a big change that's taken place in true crime. And I think that's a good thing. And to kind of tie into what I wanted to say about it, like as it pertains to true crime YouTubers, I feel like this talking point right here, true crime glorifies the actions and or raises the pop culture stature of criminals. I feel like this talking point barely holds weight anymore. I'm open to being wrong. There was a significant problem with true crime in the 2010s and earlier that was super perpetrator focused or glorified the crime or came off as one of those classic pulp crime or horror comics. And you just don't see this anymore. In our YouTube bio, we opened with, there's a problem with true crime. And the reason why we said that is because of the existence of the aforementioned true crime productions. But I don't feel it's relevant anymore. I feel like in the past couple of years, we've seen a swift change in the true crime community to become more victim-centric. This idea that we worship criminals across the bulk of true crime YouTubers, it's just not true. Now, again, where you do still see this is on, you know, your, like I can reference Dahmer, of course, but if you're talking about people like us, I just don't think we set out with the intention to not only do we not have the intention to not glorify the perpetrator, I think we put in our due diligence to do the opposite. So,
I know I've, oh, sorry.
Oh, well, really quick, I just want to clarify. This is, in many of the articles that I read, they focus specifically on things like dramatizations of crimes and such, rather than specifically more documentarian journalistic type deals. So they brought up the Dahmer thing many times in several of the articles I read. So that I try to modify the question to sort of pertain in a general sense, but they were often referring to actual, you know, a Ted Bundy TV movie or a Dahmer series or something like that, which is decidedly different from what most YouTubers do. And so that's why I made it a bit more generalized. Just want to make sure that people knew the background of where this came from. But go ahead.
Thank you. Well, one thing I just wanted to throw in as well, in terms of like focusing more on the victims and more on the perpetrator. I'll say for my part, and I don't feel attacked at all on this. I just think it kind of leaves out an interesting road of why some people might wind up being, more perpetrator focused, but in good faith. I'd say for my channel, for the most part, like say 80+% of the time, definitely. My videos actually are more perpetrator focused, definitely in terms of their branding. Like the perpetrator is much more likely to have their name in the title, for instance, than the victim, though not always, but a lot of the time. And certainly the content of the video for my stuff is going to spend more time talking about the perpetrator. But the reason for that is like within my particular medium, my way of storytelling, it does actually become a necessity because of the way that things naturally play out, i.e. the victim dies. And then a lot of other stuff happens after that because that's the nature of investigations. And of course, all the stuff that's happening centers around this perpetrator or suspect because that's the person who's being investigated. So there's not really any way, if you're covering things like that, there's not really any way to spend all that time talking about the victim unless you're just going into more and more and more and more detail about the nature of their wounds or the way their body decomposed or, something ridiculous like that, right? But I think within that, so it comes back to that word glorification, right? The way you're covering it, you're not doing it in a way that, I don't know, makes the perpetrator some kind of tragic hero or whatever, or whitewashes the severity of the evidence against them to get kind of like intrigue clicks or what have you. Like, and in talking about the victim when you're doing so in a respectful, not denigrating kind of what's the word, I'll just say denigrating for lack of a better word way. It's just about trying to square things as best you can where you can, if that makes sense.
No, Matt, that's a very good point, and I hope you didn't think that I was like putting that on you
No,
in that way.
no,
like,
I tried to make clear. I wasn't saying that because I felt attacked. I just thought it was a good thing to kind of like go down another road on the same topic is all I'm saying.
No, exactly. And I think when you explain it that way, it makes me realize that I could have worded my response way better, because I think that you can talk about the perpetrator without glorifying the perpetrator, as you said. And I think that's more what I was getting at, because some things that certain people do, and to some extent you have to mention the perpetrator unless you're one of these people that are like, don't say their name or else, you're doing victims a disservice. But I feel like that's a very fringe belief. I think it's important to understand what happened here so that maybe somebody, if one person can take this and make sure it doesn't happen to them or somebody they love, that's important. And you have to study the perpetrator to some extent to know that. As long as we aren't sympathizing with them or glorifying what they did, or as you said, turning them into an anti-hero. When I was talking about this, I was thinking of like the glorification of Dahmer, the sexualization of Ted Bundy and things of like that. I don't feel that sort of thing goes on anymore.
Hey, yeah. I'm gonna jump in on this one because I have a lot of thoughts on it. With the way that my mind works, right, when it comes to questions, I get very nitpicky about words. So I'm looking at the word glorify here, and then I go straight to the definition. I do this a lot. People hate it when I do this in my everyday life.
I think it's a good thing, actually, Dave.
I do it a lot because I get posed these questions just in any scenario in my life, and I like to make sure that what I'm answering is exactly what is being asked of me. So you look at the word glorify, and it says the definition is to praise and worship. The second definition is to describe or represent as admirable, especially unjustifiably. So let's be real. I don't think, even out of all of the sloppier true crime channels that I've seen, I don't think any of us glorify any criminals. I really don't. I don't think I've seen any channel over all of the years that I've been watching true crime glorify a perp. The closest that I have seen is what Scribe made the distinction of the Netflix series, right? So they would hire an attractive actor to play the part, and then they would give them a relatable character arc or something like that too. And even then, I don't know if that's glorifying. I think that's humanizing, maybe. So really, the issue here, and I've experienced that on the most recent video that I released, the Wade Wilson. There is, with the Wade Wilson story that I just did, there is an entire community of men and women who contact this criminal and profess their love for him. There's TikTok videos made about how attractive he is, how much people love him, and this guy did some really horrible stuff. So I think the issue here, when it comes to the question, the idea of glorifying a perpetrator, I don't want to sound blamey over here, like audience blamey, but I think the issue here is that there's some people in the world who are genuinely unhinged. They're genuinely unhinged, right? So I don't see how us reporting on a perp and saying, well, this is what they did, this is the gory, explicit details of what this person did, and I agree with Mr. Black that sometimes you have to dive into those details to give people a proper understanding of what sort of monster we're dealing with. And I really don't think that by us diving into these nitty-gritty details and potentially even, you know, for the moment, we forget that the victim is a human being. We forget that because all we're focused on is what the hell's going on here? What happened to them? And once we get into that territory of really presenting the gory details, I like to think that all of us rein it back and we then refocus on the victim or on what's going on. It's not like we get stuck on those details. But if a person is watching one of these presentations, one of these videos, and then they see this criminal and they say, wow, what a legend, or I'd like to have sex with him, you know, or she's good looking. If somebody is watching our videos and having that response, that's on them. That's really, I can't.
And in terms of like glorification, one name I'm seeing in the comments crop up a little bit is Ted Bundy, and that might be a good example. Like him specifically, obviously, we've been talking about Dahmer a little bit earlier. I think sort of similar, like different, but in a similar way. Like this kind of general cult of serial killers is, I think maybe it's less so today, but it's had some prevalence in the US. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, is another example. Will get a lot of pen pals in prison. Manson, probably the greatest example of, again, glorification, not saying greatest, but like the biggest example of that of all time, right? Of like someone who does horrible things, they wind up becoming kind of a pop culture figure. I don't think you can point the blame for that at any given one person. It's sort of it's a cultural development that it probably has a lot of, lot of causes that it stems from, but it's, it's troubling.
We can't control who watches the videos, both ours and the videos that have been made before our time. We can't control that. And there's a lot of people in the world. So if you get a million views on your video, and let's be 95% of people are probably not going to comment, right? That we hear the comments from the most outspoken, both on the positive and the negative side. So let's say out of the people that do choose to comment, there is a group of people that are in favor of the criminal. That makes a lot of noise. That makes a lot of ruckus, and we can't control that. It's just in my opinion, and I know that this term gets thrown around a lot, and it's not the most like words. Come on, people. It's like echo chambery sort of. I'm trying to think how to put it into words. the vocal minority. You know, if there's a vocal minority that are saying we love this guy, then how do you combat that? How do you make a video in the true crime genre that's discussing, like, we're all adults, we're all choosing to, hopefully the adults that are watching our content are, no one's forcing them to watch it. So you just, this whole criticism of the true crime genre, it's irrelevant to me.
All right. I've been withholding commenting on these, but I at least have one thing I wanted to add to this one in particular. I think, and I'm happy to hear your guys' thoughts on this as well. I think it could be forgiven if fascination is mistaken for glorification. Does that make some sense?
Well,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So let's just take it back to something specific.
Sure.
In the past of the world, you know, let's take it back to the 1940s. Should we stop talking about the Holocaust?
I don't know. Does YouTube allow us to?
I would say
No,
no.
I mean,
Yeah.
YouTube does not allow us to. From what I understand, it's a World
We're not
War
gonna
II
die-
channels. Yeah.
We're not going to dive into that topic, but should we stop talking about World War II?
No.
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 And to build on that, like, should we make, whenever we talk about the Holocaust, we never mention Hitler?
Exactly. So now here's the problem. If we take it back to what we said earlier as well about news channels, I genuinely think they get away with a lot more because especially if you're like text based, there's no face, there's no one to point the blame at. YouTube was great at this for a long time because it was a corporation. You couldn't point the blame at anyone. Coca-Cola got away with a lot of stuff. Pepsi got away with a lot of stuff because there's no person named Pepsi or face called Coca-Cola, unless you want to call Santa, I guess. So I think it's similar whenever you take away the face and the name from these evil monsters. So it's about how you talk about them. Are you talking about, or are you painting Dahmer and Bundy in a romanticizing light? Are you making them likable? Are you sympathizing with them? Are you simping for these people? No. So that's a big difference. Just like, you know, the bad guy from Germany, let's say. let's just say that. Just like him, we can talk about him and say the things that he did, and just because we said his name doesn't mean we're romanticizing or supporting him. But you're right. There's always going to be people who will go, well, I liked him. So I try to do the best I can on my channel to really rub these monsters' names in the dirt the best I can. So anyone that watches my channel that is in favor of that, they're quickly going to not like me and be gone, because that's not what they came for. If you're going to romanticize them. Now, in terms of pop culture, look, popularity can easily be mistaken for likability. It happens all the time. Someone can be really famous, but not very likable. And, you know, I suppose, yeah, we can make people popular by talking about them. The bad man from Germany is pretty popular, but not very well liked. And I think that's the point that should be made. Like true crime, just because I've reported on the facts, number one, again, I don't think it makes me a journalism, and I don't think it glorifies what that person did. Especially if you, for me personally, I tell it in a way that this is a monster. This is a monster. Sometimes people will say, no, you need to stop saying monster. This person is a human. The human did this. And I'm like, no, monster, dog, ass, rat. That's what they are. And if you don't like it, beat it. And that's all there is to it. So
I want to jump in again and build on what you're talking about, Mr. Black. This is something that I get pretty passionate about, because it leads into censorship, right? And it leads into the whole what we can and can't talk about, and it drives me insane. The fact that you can't say the bad man from Germany's name, or you can't say the actual word for self-termination, it drives me absolutely insane, because it assumes that the people who are watching are idiots. And fair enough, there might be some idiots, but there's a whole lot of people who are not. And so if you bump into, just like if you were walking down the street and you see some guy who's a raving sexist, racist, whatever, that's saying the most horrible things, well, I'm glad that they're saying those things and I can hear it, because I know to stay away from that person. I know not to become friends with that person. Like, that person is clearly an idiot. And and we as people, right, there's going to be some idiots that look at that and say, oh, what that person's saying, there's some merit to that. But I like to imagine, maybe I'm mistaken, but I like to imagine that the vast majority of us would look at that and be disgusted. And we now know who the disgusting person is. So if you've got a channel that's talking about the bad man from Germany or the Holocaust or any of this stuff, you know, we as a viewer should be able to watch that and make our own decision on how this information is being presented. I don't like this whole idea of censoring what we can and can't talk about. If I want to make a video about the perpetrator and I want to dive into the crimes, and then I'm going to do that respectfully towards the victim and critically of the perp, then I should be allowed to do that and not be accused of glorifying some actions. But if there's a person out there, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
If there's a person out there that's making a video that says, oh, and you'll never believe what this mad lad did, you know, he went and he attacked 6 women, what a legend. Like, if a person wants to make that video, let them, and then we can all destroy them in the comments. And I don't know, you know, it's the whole idea of glorification. I'm going to start rambling, so I'll stop.
See, the thing is about telling these stories as well too. Some of those details can actually do good in helping someone else go, oh, geez, I never thought about that. And I'll take that extra precaution next time so it doesn't happen to me. And a big person a big monster I can think of for that was BTK. Now, I tell this to people that I know who aren't even true crime fans. I tell this to people, lock your doors during the day. When I go take the trash out, I lock the door because I have a wife and a 2-year-old. And we live in an apartment complex. It doesn't take anybody to be hiding around the corner to just sneak in and be there. BTK did exactly things like that. He would actually just try and sneak in after somebody went in. So you lock the door immediately. Don't take that chance. Anything can happen. And if we start taking away these details and how things happen, because I think Jim Can't Swim even had a problem with YouTube not liking that they were giving away details of how crimes were being committed and how they were being caught. And it's like, people need to know this stuff. This is important. This can equal the safety of others. But if we start removing this stuff away and go, don't talk about that, that just glorifies how he did it. Somebody else is going to hear that he did it that way, and they're going to do it. Well, hopefully more people heard and they locked their doors or whatever the precaution was.
By the way, the more people who start to feel comfortable participating or agreeing to interrogation because they've seen Jim Can't Swim videos, so now they can figure it all out, the more people who do that, the more criminals we're going to catch. So I wouldn't put any stock in that particular criticism of JCS.
The phrase "sunlight is the best disinfectant" comes to mind as you were talking about these kind of things. Okay, well, we're about on schedule here, which is good. I'm kind of surprised, honestly. So let's move on to.
I could say a lot more on that one, but I'm holding back.
Well, I'll tell you what. If we have some extra time at the end, and if people want to keep going,
we never heard from Jurgi.
Well, I'm sorry, Jurgi. Go ahead.
This is very true.
Well,
this is very true.
I think for like the last topic we discussed, a lot of like my opinion on this topic bled together, so it's totally fine.
Are you sure? And I apologize. I didn't in the hub.
No, I just kind of like cobbled both of them together, really.
Okay.
Scribe, you pig.
Cancel
You
Scribe.
sexist.
Cancel him.
I know. Here it comes. Here it comes. The time has come, guys. All right. Well, and in bits and pieces, this has been touched on a bit, but this last one is probably the most common argument against true crime that I've seen. And so I kind of saved it for last. And so curious to hear what you guys have to say. And for everybody in the chat, if we have some extra time at the end here, I'll start taking some questions from you guys as we have time to do so. And this is it. True crime is bad for mental health and desensitizes society. Let's start with Jurgi.
Yes, please, because I have a lot to say. So
there you go. It's your turn.
Yes, this has been a gripe of mine for a very long time. So people need to understand that not everything is for you. You are not entitled to anything. So if you feel that true crime is bad for your mental health, then the space is simply not for you. Watch something else. If you don't like how something has been stated, watch something else. You're not entitled to a space. I don't like trigger warnings. I think they're stupid, especially in true crime, because the absolute worst days of a person's life shouldn't come with a trigger warning attached. If you're going to come into the true crime space, you know what you're going to be hearing about. So with regards to the desensitization, I can't speak, I'm sorry, of society, what people are like referring to are mainly Western folks who have the privilege of not being exposed to the horrors of the world. For much of the rest of the world, this is a reality on a daily basis. And to me, the talking point is so inauthentic that it doesn't actually come from a place of concern for anyone's actual mental health. I feel personally it is a talking point for those who are perpetually online, who want to be mentally ill as a fashion statement, and you can take that however you want to.
All right.
I think
Oh, sorry. Oh,
Oh,
no,
sorry.
go ahead, Matt. No, it's fine. I was just going in the circle, but go ahead.
Well, I think the last point Yugi is how I say it. Sorry. Yeah, I think the last point she made was one I completely co-sign. If you see someone popping up going, oh, like basically going into areas, like in this case, virtual areas that are inherently upsetting. I mean, there is absolutely no question in the branding and presentation that what you're about to see is about some kind of horrible murder or what. I mean, our content is all very clear in the way it's labeled. You go to a thing like that and then start talking about like, I wish you would just like not mention that because it did it. I think in most cases, people who do that are actually enough getting off on it is the right term. And I don't necessarily mean to put that kind of sexual connotation to it, but they've found an outlet where they sort of enjoy putting their mental health suffering on other people and saying, why don't you adjust the way you do things to cater to me, is really the thing they're more trying to do than quote unquote protect their mental health, if you get what I mean. I think very much co-sign that last point Yugi made.
If
All
I
right.
may go next.
Of course.
I will never, ever put someone down for not wanting to consume true crime for mental health reasons. I no longer consume true crime except as it relates to a case we're covering. Having to be neck deep in true crime constantly is just hard enough on one's mental health, and I can't do any more than that. So I'll be the first to say that if you feel that way, then stop listening to true crime. But not everyone is like that, and they shouldn't be shamed as such. Multiple people have told me that they have found closure in their own personal traumas by listening to us. There are people who have credited us as the reason that made them make that call to CPS or to police or somebody to say something when they saw something instead of being complacent. If it wasn't for us starting this channel and being willing to take viewer requests, I never, ever would have known about the systemic issues that lead to child murder.
Here, here.
I figured every child murder was its own unique situation. I didn't realize that many of these cases look almost exactly identical from case to case. If I didn't know that, somebody who used to consume true crime in their free time for a big chunk of their life, then how is the average person supposed to know this? How is the average person supposed to know the signs to look for when the average person doesn't know this is a systemic problem? I remember up until a few years ago, there was a myth being perpetuated that human trafficking rarely, if ever, takes place in America, that it's something that only plagues third world countries. Now there's so much awareness that's been raised that average people know it exists in this country. You see posters now in bathrooms. It gives you a number to call if you're being trafficked. There was never anything like that years ago. It's being openly talked about now. This is what raising awareness can help do. The conversation can't even be had if people don't even know the problems exist. And true crime helps contribute to raising awareness. So that's all I'll say about that.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You know, it reminds me of my favorite comedians, Ricky Gervais. Well, it's one of them. I just love the guy. I've loved him since the podcast. But he had a really good thing about his comedy being offensive, and I think it ties into this too. He was like, it's like somebody, walking down the street and seeing a billboard or a poster for guitar lessons and going, but I don't want bloody guitar lessons. It's like, dude, don't click the video. Or the second you find out it's something that's going to mess with your head, get out of there. Everyone's going to understand it. Some types of music are triggering to some types of people. That's fine. Don't listen to it. You don't need to go put yourself through it and try to run attention for your own drama's sake. There's no point in that. And I don't think we're looking at the desensitizes society enough. Desensitizes. I think nothing desensitizes society more than erasing it and not talking about it and pretending like it doesn't happen. If you were to talk to Tom, my co-host on Cringe Against Humanity, Tom had no clue about this stuff. Tom's 29 and he's from Latvia. That's where I live. He had no clue about that this stuff happened. And the first case he came in on and started working with me on was the baby Brianna case. And he was just like, oh my God. And then we did Anita Cobby. I'm sure you know the Anita Cobby case, Dave. Horrible case. We actually we have them here. We actually printed out all of the photos. These are the assets we used. We printed them out, cut them up, went through the story, filmed them, did everything we could to present this case in a way that was respectful and really told the story. And Tom was just broken over it. There's a lot of people out there that don't know that this happens. Now, it didn't mess with his mental health, but it opened his eyes to the world. I'm sure that guy looks over his shoulder a little bit more, locks his door, a little more careful. I certainly am since I got into true crime, and I'm glad for it. But if it's not for you, don't do it. I don't think it desensitizes anybody. In my opinion, what would desensitize people is just strictly reviewing gore, right? If you're just one of those channels that just looks up gore, there's no story, there's no way there's nothing to get out of it. There's no lesson to be learned. It's just this guy got his face melted off. We don't know his name, by the cartel. And that's what the cartel wanted, was for you to review that videos to create fear about them. That's different. That's a little different. We maybe could veer into that, but that's not what we do. That's totally different. It's just, I just don't understand the allegation at all. Blows my mind.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think what is interesting here is that with our videos, from what I've seen, we might have 5% of the video have gory details, and then the other 95% is the story, right? Is the information around the gory details. And so if we were just presenting, and when I say we, I mean, again, all true crime content creators that I've seen, if we were just presenting gore and, doing top 10 most despicable murders and stuff like that, then I think the criticism could be valid, but we're not. So anyone who launches that criticism against work like ours, it shows that they don't really understand what the work is. They don't understand what we are doing as a community. And the other thing I was thinking as well with the whole, but I agree with everyone else's comments that the bad for mental health. We can't be responsible for other individuals. If an individual is feeling like their mental health is suffering, then they have to be responsible for that. They can't continue to do the thing that is pulling them down. And if watching these sort of videos is affecting mental health negatively, then they need to stop that. And I would never criticize someone for stopping. But the desensitization of society is an interesting one. That word desensitize, it has a very negative, well, I feel like it has a very negative ring to it. But when I think of my own desensitization, so when I started this channel, I hate to admit it, but cases hit me a lot harder than they hit me now. And I'll be working on cases now with some pretty horrific details, and it won't shock me like it used to. So I am desensitized, or I'm becoming desensitized to a degree. Does that affect my empathy? Does that affect my rational thought? It really doesn't. I mean, just because I may be desensitized to the horrors of what can happen, that doesn't mean that I want to see those things happen, or that I am okay with them happening, in a simple way to put it.
Are you
So-
less
so I-
disgusted though, or are you just less shocked?
Less shocked, completely.
See, I
but
think that's when you think of desensitized, I think it's almost as if you're numb to it or you're less disgusted. Whereas I'm just as disgusted. I'm just not as shocked anymore.
Can,
Yeah,
can
so
I
ma-
say? Can I throw in something on this? Because I think, because we might be talking about different things, but that's sort of why it's interesting. I almost find the opposite sometimes, in the sense that, and I'm not talking about covering true crime in the main, but I'm talking about picking up any given case. When I pick it up, it's almost like from the beginning, they're just like pieces on a chessboard in my content that I've got to create. All right, here's the crime, that's one piece. Here are the individuals involved. Those are other pieces. Here are the circumstances. Those are kind of other pieces, and I've got to kind of put this together. But as I kind of get into that and start doing it and start familiarizing myself more and more with the case and who these people were, their backgrounds, the things that kind of humanize them, and I form more of a concept and a more accurate concept of who these people actually were or are in my mind, then it starts actually really, it can affect me on a very deep level, and I am in no way desensitized to it. I'm more
100%,
desensitized from the
100%.
start than the end. Yeah.
It's
The
like you
exact
become
same
almost
thing.
like a distant relative in a way. I don't mean that in a weird way. There's a
I
name
understand
for
what
it.
you mean. Yeah.
It's
You feel like you know them.
Para something relationship. It's almost what
Yeah, I am.
what your fans of your
Parasocial.
channel parasocial relationship towards that person. Again, I go back to these. When you print all these out, you enhance them on Photoshop, and you hang these up, and you film them, and you set up robot gears to make your camera film them, and you spend so much time with the images of these people and with this story. You're exactly right. It's almost the opposite of that. It's almost, have you ever had the feeling that when you finished a case that you put so much into, you almost felt like you lost somebody and you didn't get to go to their funeral?
Yes.
Yeah, or you're saying, and this is kind of weird way to put it, but you're like saying goodbye to a friend and like saying goodbye to the case. It's kind of like, oh, I mean, even though, it was very, heartbreaking to kind of go through and everything, it's like, I'll miss you. I'll miss this cat. Like,
Well, you have to
yeah, there's
decompress,
like-
you
100%.
you're like, hold on, I knew this person almost, and like I didn't get to go to the funeral. What is that? Is that all? This person was, like Anita Cobby stands out to me so much as one of the adult ones, and then on top of that, the baby Brianna case. This Fallon Fridley is really toying with me in that sense, because you're just like, oh, hold on, you just lost somebody too, and even though you didn't really,
And of course
but
you didn't.
it
And it's
feels
not,
that way.
and your feelings are nowhere near the level of like the parents or the like
course.
spouses,
And-
or
but that makes it worse.
but
you start to sympathize with them and empathize with them and start to see that in a light and go, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's a really strange thing, and I don't think that is anywhere near desensitizing anyway. But I actually understand what you both are saying, to be fair.
Yeah, I experienced the same thing. I guess what I was getting at is that when I first started a case and I read the details, that would be very shocking to me. Whereas now my process is more like Matt's, where it's like, here are the pieces, and then once I start putting it together, then I start forming this connection. But I don't know if the viewer has that experience, because we are immersing ourselves in this for sometimes weeks on end with a case. And so I'm not too sure if the viewer has that. And the desensitization to the viewer might result in a similar feeling to what I have when I first start a case. But what I think, and what I was
I try to
towards-
actually, sorry to just to interject there. I try to actually take the precautions to almost force the viewer to feel what I felt through the production. So I spent a lot of time on the intro, the prologue, and the storytelling aspect of it for that reason. So people can relate to it, and it doesn't just run off them like water. I specifically go into it, and some people say it's disrespectful to treat it like a Netflix documentary or whatever, but I think it sticks with people more when you take that time. For me personally, this is just for me and my audience. I think it sticks with them longer, and I'll get emails a year or two later about the same case. Hey, did you see the update in this? You know, things like that. I'm sure you experience the same thing with your audience, but yeah, it's just
and I think that you're successful in the way that you do it, because if you weren't, then you wouldn't get those sort of responses. I do this. I try to do a similar thing at the end of my videos, where I try my best to present my emotional state right at the end to let everyone else know what I was going through.
We need that. The reason that we do what we do, all of us, I'm sure, there must be a little part of all of us that we're sick of the robot, unbiased, neutral reporting when it comes to cases like this. There is a clear-cut person who lost, and there's a clear-cut monster in most of these cases. And I don't see any problem with us displaying that's the case, for sure. You know, and I think that's what sets what we do, at least the guys on this panel, what we do apart from news stations, and maybe don't want to kick dust at anybody, but some of the makeup and murder channels. Look, to each their own, but for us, that's not what works. I think we're completely different. We have emotion, we put emotion into it, we feel, and we're not afraid to say we feel, you know?
Yeah. I think the worst, well, not the worst case, but the most profound effect that I believe it would have on people is the whole, ignorance is bliss. So if we hide this sort of information from society, then people may leave their doors unlocked when they shouldn't and whatnot. So yeah, sure, people might now go through the world and be aware that these horrible things happen, and those horrible things may not shock them as much as it did when they first heard about it. But at least now they'll keep their doors locked. Well,
you're 100% right. You are spot on, actually. I'm from Jonesboro, Arkansas. Now, 40, 50 minutes from me is West Memphis. It's actually in Arkansas, and it's just over the river from Memphis, Tennessee. So West Memphis is a town on its own. And you may remember the case from West Memphis where the little boys were found murdered. The West Memphis 3, I think it's called.
I did a video on it last year. Yeah.
I have a case file full of images. I'm actually going to cover it too. My mother and I were there. We filmed around the locations. And let me tell you something. I was the same age as those kids when this case broke. Now we're talking 40 minutes down the road from me. And one of the kids, I have a picture. I looked exactly like him. One of the kids that was murdered. I looked exactly like him. And let me tell you,
Stevie or Christopher.
I think
Michael?
it was. No, I don't think it was Michael. The one with the bowl cut.
Yeah, it's Christopher. Chris. Yeah.
Is that Christopher? Yeah.
Yeah. Very.
Let me tell you something. When that came out, and I'm in second grade. I think I'm 8. Nobody hid what happened. No, my mom immediately told me what happened, and that was the start of stranger danger for my area. 100%. We didn't go near cars we didn't know or people we didn't know because that happened. And because of cases like Morgan Nick, also in Arkansas, we did not go near strangers. Now, the next time something like that happened, was I a little less shocked by it? A little bit, but I still withheld that awareness that I learned from the West Memphis 3 case. And it was told to me. I remember my mom telling me graphic details about it. And it shocked and scared me. And it was good that it did that to me, because I stayed safe because of it.
All right. I know.
I'm not saying that, by the way, I'm not saying that we need to start pushing gore and true crime gory details for our kids, but that specific case didn't come across.
I mean, in the 90s. My mom did it to me too in the late 80s and early 90s, and I'm alive today because of it.
Well, in that vein, we have a super chat, the very first super chat ever given by Abs. Thank you so much, Abs. I do think people need to take responsibility for the content they consume online, but I also think there's always a safe and unsafe way to talk about certain things. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, look, in terms of really shocking spikes in a video or whatever, I'm in a situation where I really don't we talked about trigger warnings before. I find that explicit, oh, before we do this, you should be aware this is coming. That can kind of break the narrative flow. So I try and avoid that wherever I can. There's been like a couple of things of like an on-screen warning of skip. But what I'm getting at is what I try to do is certainly I wouldn't like open a video with like no warning and here's some like really gory images. But what I would try to do is that, like, let's say 30% into the video, there's some bad imagery or there's some really upsetting audio. Without delivering a warning, this is coming, it would be made very clear in the way the narrative is unfolding that this is where we're going and this is what's about to happen. Like, it's self-evident in the way things are being told, if you get what I mean. Like, you can see the hand is about to push the play button and they're saying, and, you know, they got audio from the crowd. I haven't actually done this specific, just an example. But, you know, they got crime scene from the audio and they were about to play it and listen to the horrors that lay from with it. Get it, audience? This is coming, sort of thing, rather than like a straight disclaimer, which I sometimes might put at the very beginning of a video, like my most recent one, like this video contains footage of real life violence. I might say that at the very beginning, but every other warning will kind of be implicit in the way the narrative is unfolding, if you get what I mean.
I agree with you, but I still obviously agree with what Jurgi said earlier too, that, you know where you're at as well. You're here,
Yeah.
and you don't have to be here. We're not in public on a soapbox screaming gory details at people, and we're also not just going on talking about gory details. We're not gore channels, I think, any of us. So there is that kind of distinction too. And I also have put pre-warnings mid video before if it's something really heinous out of nowhere. I mean, Anita Cobby, those details were tough.
Sure, there are exceptions. Like, yeah, there's been some case.
The two Colombian serial killers. I mean, the stuff they did were just Luis Garavito and Pedro Lopez. I mean, so those were kind of things that I knew this is really going to catch people off guard. So I better say it and give them a chance to skip forward. But I rarely do that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. There are exceptions where it's like there's no way to make it go without saying, and it's so shocking that people deserve the heads up. So we just have to shoehorn this in. Like, yeah, there's some situations. I agree. Yeah.
We had 3 that were like that.
We just did that recently with Tesla and O'Call.
Yes, because Tesla and O'Call ran the same kind of vein as Baby Brianna. And walking into that, like, if people weren't aware of what the story was, that would be deeply unsettling. I'm not gonna like give spoilers or anything like that. I mean, if like you want to look into that yourself, it is pretty deeply disturbing. But like that is like one of that and animal stuff, because nobody like expects to be coming across that.
Mm-hmm. We had a celebrity in the chat. Local celebrity in human form, Formy. Nice to see you, Formy. Previous guest on my.
Hey, doing, Formy?
Hey, Scribe. Also, a more. I think Dave will appreciate this as he is into definitions. A more scientifically accurate term for desensitization is habituation. So there you go. Yes.
I am Googling the definition right now.
There you go. Adding it to.
I just want to know why you couldn't put that 1 extra cent to make it a round off 5. You know,
I don't know.
Are you from?
Yeah, it's some OCD financial advice right there. Okay, well, just for if our audience doesn't already realize it, and especially our guests, we are just about at the 2-hour mark. I'm happy to let things continue on or have you guys circle back to other topics, but on the off chance that people's time zones or bedtimes are coming up, I just wanted to check in and see if people were cool with starting to wind things down, or if you wanted to continue, that's perfectly fine as well. Drewby,
I can go for a while longer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
What was that, Scribe?
Oh, I just wanted to check in if people were, you know, because of the time zones and bedtimes and such, if people wanted.
Yeah, we're still good. Yeah.
Okay, and before I even continue that, holy cats, Miranda Stone, my 17 children, thank you. Abs wanted to clarify she didn't mean warnings. Okay, well, I missed that, and I apologize for Abs. I didn't see that in the flux of things. And Miranda Stone, that is a very pricey clarification, and I appreciate it very, very much.
Where's
There's
the
gonna be
dog
some
tag box?
happy. There's gonna be some happy dogs out there, right?
Scribe, you're profiting off of misery of others.
I didn't know.
No,
I'm
it's going-
sorry.
That's what I mean by
I
there's
will
gonna be
make
some
amends.
happy. There's some happy dogs, right? You had some charities that you're.
Well,
Yeah, well, all dogs go to heaven, so yeah.
I will say, and my audience knows this, that when a particular run of generosity comes my way, I pay it forward, and I don't have it pinned up there. I probably should. For those of you interested, my selected charity is the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of America. We're hearing Yergi type.
Yergi,
Oh, sorry, that could be
sorry,
me.
Oh, okay. Whoever's typing.
Yeah, that was me. I forgot to mute.
That's okay. As many people in my audience know, my father this year was diagnosed with leukemia, and I was a donor to that organization prior for other personal reasons, but more so now. So yes, I'll be making thanks to everyone's, and especially Miranda Stone. Holy cow, you're bankrolling my entire day. I'll be making a donation to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society shortly, and I will
put my share towards that as well.
Okay,
Good cause.
I will do so, and I'll make sure to post a receipt to Twitter so everybody knows that happened when the time comes. Okay, so let's do a sort of roundup, let's say, to try to move towards a conclusion here.
We're not getting a dog, cat, fox first.
Would you like a dog, cat, fox?
I would
I've got
love
several.
a dog, cat, fox.
Okay, let me give you my favorite dog, cat, fox. The one that makes me laugh every time, because I think after all this we could use a little levity. Let me turn this off real quick first. Okay, so this dog, cat, fox, just for some background, comes from my friend Tailed Feature, one of my oldest YouTube friends. Not old as in chronological age, but just oldest as far as like familiarity. He and I started around the same time back in 2016. I asked him for a dog, cat, fox, a wowie wow wow. He sent me two, and one is great. The other one kind of goes like this.
Wowie wow wow.
That always cracks me up.
What is that?
Yeah, well, do you know about dog, cat, fox? He lives with
I
me on
do
the
not.
moon. Yeah, okay, so I live on the moon, if you didn't know, in Crater Valley in my moon base. A dog, cat, fox is my longtime companion. He is a genetic experiment, obviously a combination of a dog, a cat, and a fox. And he's always hanging out with me on my streams, aren't you? Wowie, wow, wow. Yeah, so he's always here hanging out. And from my YouTube friends and some of my viewers, I have solicited their own versions of wowie, wow, wow. And so if any of you, for whatever reason under the sun, decide to submit to me some wowie, wow, wows, I'll make you guys stingers yourselves on here. But that's a dog, cat, fox. And that dog, cat, fox goes out to Keeverdam for the previous dog, cat, fox super chat. So thank you for that. With that piece of
man, bear, pig. But
sure.
Okay, cool.
Except, well, I mean, they're kissing cousins, I suppose, at best. Was there anything in the course of human events here that anyone has thought about more so on any of the topics we've talked about, or something else you wanted to bring up? And I'll just go around the circle here. Yergi?
I think I've really kind of covered everything that I wanted to cover, but
Okay.
thank you for having us.
Sure. Mr. Black, any closing thoughts on these subjects?
I think you just have to be for ourselves. I think we just have to be confident that we're doing the best job that we can, and we're sticking to how we feel. I really still feel what Dave said earlier about questioning yourself as you go. I think it's very important to reevaluate how you create content, the cases you choose, and how you tell them, and just make sure. I certainly have changed from the very start with how I would deliver them. Maybe not so much as production value, that's kind of stayed the same, but just some things I maybe have altered a little bit, just reassessing myself and going forward. That I think that's probably the best advice that anyone said today was what Dave said there, which is you were just saying what you do for yourself, how you feel. But I do that too. And I feel like we all probably do that, and we should still continue. When you stop doing that, you should probably be worried.
Matt?
In terms of closing thoughts, I think Mr. Black hit on like the real gist of what I would say, which is like just try to do your best, right? So long as you're trying to do your best, I think that's the most anyone can make a firm commitment to on ethics, because ethics largely, unless they're kind of like so out there that it becomes not subjective, right? Just absolute, you know it when you see it kind of thing, exploitation. All you can do is try your best, and again, try and stay within the bounds of what is good taste, right? Because sometimes, you might make an artistic decision that some people think is in poor taste. And the thing you've got to get over as a creator is that you can't actually prove that person wrong, because it is a matter of taste. So long as you didn't mean anything poorly by it, and you weren't trying to be exploitive, and you look back at it and you think objectively, no, I reason that was still within bounds, that kind of has to be good enough, because you can't prove it scientifically. I mean, that's just the way it is.
All right, Dave.
I could use this opportunity to go on a rant about censorship, but I won't. We'll be here for a long time. I appreciate what you said, Mr. Black, as well. I think that's a very good point. I guess with the work that we're doing, if we do stop questioning whether what we're doing is right, that would be worrying. An interesting thing that I was thinking about, well, I find it interesting, is the question of what the hell even is YouTube, right? It's just, I know it's developed a lot over the years, and it's far from the Wild West that it used to be, but it's still kind of this Wild West of entertainment. And there's no background checks that you need to do to make a channel. There's no job interview that you need to go for. You could, any person, no matter who they are, can just fire up a channel and start making stuff, whatever they want to make.
And we don't know if it's going to be successful either. So it's not like
we really don't.
You're going to have 300,000 subscribers. That happens. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, we just sort of started doing it for our own reasons, and then for whatever reason we got a following, and here we are. So the thing that I go back to, I suppose, well, I had been going back to on my thoughts whilst over the course of this, is that, we're not journalists, and we haven't sold ourselves as journalists. Like, really what we're doing here is we're kind of like a friend that tells stories. You go to your friend's house, and you know that friend has some stories to tell, and if you enjoy, I use the word enjoy in commas, in quotation marks, if you enjoy the sort of stories that person is telling, then you go back to their house and you keep hanging out with them. We have the whole YouTube landscape is so interesting in the sense that you don't just make one video, you make multiple videos, and then people get to know your personality through these videos. We may not be doing vlogs, or we may not be doing personal, home tours or whatnot, but it's impossible to make content like this and not have some of your personality shine through. And I think that's what people come back for. If we were doing just hard facts, then you can get that really through your own research, but people enjoy the way that we present these videos. And it is like, it sounds so weird to say, but it's like each person that chooses to subscribe is kind of like your friend, right? They enjoy the way that you tell these stories. So I think what I take away from this whole thing, and what I will think about moving forward, is that I'm not going to really worry too much about these criticisms of the true crime community, because ultimately I don't think that they're sounds bad. I don't think they're valid, because we're just people. If people don't like our content, just turn it off, and we can't control how our content affects other people, because if we do want to try to control how other people take our content, then we're walking down a path of trying to control other people, which I really don't like. So the best we can do is just make our content and make our videos and see what happens.
All right. And Drewby?
I wish more people looked at the intent behind what somebody's trying to do. You know, we're not always going to get it right. We're human. We're always going to make mistakes. But I wish people would look at the bulk of our work and think, was this person doing this with malicious intentions, or are they not? I feel like that a lot of people who are making criticisms are just random people on social media, and for whatever reason, like a lot of people come to YouTube to blow off steam in their comment sections, and they'll project whatever lie or thing they resent onto us that they can, and will demand that we should be canceled, or that we should never be able to make a living, or that we deserve to die, or you name it. You know, like I think that it's really easy to be a rational person, and people don't look at us necessarily as human beings. You know, like they just like, oh, this person's a lizard person, this person's a CIA plant, this person's in a satanic cult, or whatever. It's just a game to a lot of these people, and it almost feels like people are adjusting the evidence to fit the conclusion that they've already come to. My gut says that you, YouTube creator, are a bad person, and I'm going to go with that no matter what, and I'm going to find any way to justify it. So
do you think that sometimes people are actually, a lot of times when you get that kind of hate on your channel, I've thought about this myself, do you think that some of these people are comparing you to their favorite creator in that same genre, and basically, and some of these people might even be saying like, well, you're not Misery Machine, or they're not Dave's Lemonade, and you're not presenting it the way they do, so you're not good enough. But I think those same kind of people would actually, if you started being more like the creator that they like, they would say you're ripping them off. So it almost seems like you can't win, you know?
Yeah, I think that some of those people, that's where it comes from, for sure. I think some people, it's a little more nefarious. I think some people just see, oh, this is a person talking about murder, they must be making a ton of money, and they're doing this for the wrong reasons. They don't give a shit about anyone they cover, and then they'll just find anything to try to justify that. I think that the thing we didn't talk about, though, that's probably the most important when we're talking about the credibility of true crime detractors, is like I could care less about what people say on Twitter. Couldn't care less, excuse me, my English. However, when it comes from a victim's family, I think that has to be taken seriously.
Oh yeah, no, if you heard from a family member saying they weren't happy with something you did, obviously you'd have to take that on board and try to address it.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say to something Mr. Black said, that that particular category of hater you brought up, the one who's sort of kind of defending a channel they like that was never attacked, like I think you'll probably agree this is generally how it goes. It starts out with some very venomous shit, like, oh, Mr. Blake, you did this and suck him. Unlike this creator who and does all these great things. And the thing I always find very funny when that certain category of hater comes up is that the true crime genre, whatever you might want to say about it on YouTube, has really not gotten into that kind of inter-genre rivalry at all. Like all the creators that I've seen, I mean, today being just one example, but I basically never see kind of petty feuds between creators. It's very much a kind of like, oh, hey, good on you, man. Yeah, you do. Yeah, do you want some tips? Yeah, let's trade notes or what have you.
Well, so I actually have been involved in that. I am actually
right.
I'm actually nicknamed Dead Bug Light. So I'm apparently ripping him off. I stole his voice and everything. So, but that's his fans. That's not coming from him. So,
it wasn't actually Dead Bug saying it. Yeah, right. Yeah, because I haven't seen many actual inter-creator squabbles. I think it's largely consumers taking drama they see from other spaces and going, oh, this is how crime's supposed to work, right? Yeah, you suck, this other creator's great. You're like, yeah, we don't really play that in true
Maybe
crime.
I need to-
I don't have any animus toward any other creator, and I've had, traded plenty of good words, publicly and behind the scenes with a bunch of other creators. No negative words.
Maybe I need to start instigating some kind of like drama blood sports series on here. Between
this is
true
why I
crime
think
and-
this is important, because I think this strengthens the community, because I think a lot of us in true crime kind of like operates on islands. We're kind of isolated.
Yes.
I think we need to be connected to the community more. And one thing that I will say is that a lot of other true crime genres do have squabbles. And I've seen people in the comments come in and try to force a squabble between us and another creator. I'm not going to name the channel's names because all this stuff turned out not to be true, but I've had multiple incidences of many people, not just one person, coming in and being like, this creator said something about you on their Patreon, or they stole this from you, or they did this. I've known people who have come to me and said, hey, this person came to me and said they wrote for you. Is that true? And, it's like stuff like that, real grifty stuff. And I think people just want to see that drama. People want to see creators like go head to head. Like, that is the true entertainment for people, is seeing people break the fourth wall, so to speak, of their content and then go at another creator. Like, I don't want that. Like, I want the best for everybody here. I want the best for the true crime community at large, because if we do better and we raise ourselves, then that's so much more that we can do for victims.
Yeah, in the limited capacity that I've done true crime, I found, obviously as a solo channel runner, it to be a very isolating experience. And so one of the things that I've appreciated about this series and everybody who's participated in it is the idea and the hope that things like this, forums like this, can provide both consumers of true crime and those that produce that content to get connected with other creators and learn things either about the process or how to handle things or their own experiences from different different points in their careers, let's say, or be able to refer to these videos for advice, or just to know that you might be working in a very isolating and dreary and depressing area, but you're not alone. And there are a lot of people out there that experience the same things, and there are people out there that you can communicate with if you need to. I also want to say that it wasn't a forefront in my mind when I was putting this one together, but it does fall into some themes about what I try to promote on my channel in general. And that is, I encourage everybody in life, adulthood or otherwise, to allow for the possibility that you could be wrong. Not to say that you live in self-doubt all the time, but that you don't operate in such a world of certitude that you go forth without occasionally being introspective about your own motives or the results of your actions. And that it is possible to entertain an idea without necessarily having to accept it and still get something useful out of that process. So with that as my sort of Jerry Springer wrap-up commentary, I'd like to go one more round. I'll start myself with any shout-outs to other channels or anything else that you'd like to promote as you have the opportunity to, projects you have upcoming or otherwise. For shout-outs, I'm going to do this every time because the guy does not have a Twitter account, and I think his channel deserves a lot more attention. Little Shop of Crime, run by Steve. And as I've said before, Steve has, if there is a true crime ASMR, present company except, of course, Mr. Black, your sonorous tones are great. But I got to tell you, Steve at Little Shop of Crime makes the worst things sound like a massage. I don't know how else to put it. And that's not me glorifying crime. That's just the way it is. So go check out Little Shop of Crime and say hi to Steve for me. And also, and this is a little self-serving because I'm hoping to get an interview someday in the near future. Dreading, if you have not heard of the channel Dreading, now run by two brothers, Dreading does excellent work. It really shows what a level of research and care into a subject can do in the absence of some crazy high Hollywood production value. This is the beauty of true crime sometimes, is that sometimes it's just a still image and someone being able to tell a story well and doesn't need a whole lot of bells and whistles. And Dreading does a really good job of that. And I highly recommend them. And I'll just again remind the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. please consider donating there. Or if not, if you can grab the donation link, because I don't have it handy with me, and share that out, I would appreciate it personally. And with that, I'll move on to anything you guys want to promote or shout outs you want to give. Jurgi, do you have anything?
Yeah. In terms of shout outs, one channel I definitely always want to shout out is Lane from Stuff for the Little Children. She covers child abuse cases much like we do, and I don't really feel that she gets the credit she deserves for the effort she puts in. All of her episodes are so well researched, and she just goes down rabbit holes. So I just want to shout out Lane, and I think everybody should check her out.
Okay, is that a YouTube channel?
Yep, she has a podcast and a YouTube channel, so it's Stuff for the Little Children.
Stuff for the Little Children.
Yeah, if there's anyone I could think of in the true crime space that doesn't get like all the credit and accolades they deserve, like Lane is one of the first people that comes to mind.
Okay. Anything additional, Drewby, or is...
I am my brain is like mush right now. I'm very grateful to you, Scribe, for doing this. I think this is a whole lot of good for the true crime community. I think things like this need to exist. I think things like this will strengthen us, make us better, improve us, network us. All these things I think the genre sorely needs. And I am thankful to all of you, Dave, Matt, Mr. Black, of course, Jurgi, for being here and participating in this. Oh yeah, shout out for Cam that he's didn't get to be here tonight, but with us in spirit.
Yeah, we'll have Cameron on as soon as is possible. I hope to have a one-on-one interview with him in the near future. Dave, any shout outs or anything you'd like to promote or advertise ahead of time?
Nothing that I'm working on, but I don't watch true crime anymore, same as Matt. And so it's difficult for me. The only channels that I know of the ones that I've already found, and I'm sure you all know about. In my spare time, I unwind with a range of different sort of videos. So there's two channels I want to shout out that I think are really good. The first one is I'm sorta kinda bored. So I'll put a link in the chat. This guy I just finished up my series on Lorne Armstrong and the To Catch a Predator guy, and they're following his sting in the To Catch a Predator appearance. Lorne has been catfished by a community of people, and he's been getting catfished since 2017 till now. It's a group of people that have constructed a reality around him, and he fully believes it's real. It's absolutely astonishing. And the amount of calls, some of these people, I'm not going to go into my thoughts on how I feel about it all because it's complicated and intense. But some of these people spend 14 hours a day on phone calls with Lorne Armstrong. It's
good gravy.
It's unbelievable. So you can imagine how much content there is there, right? From 2017, this has been happening. And I'm sort of kind of bored has a 4-part series on Lorne Armstrong. The total runtime is 9 hours. And he kind of summarizes the whole thing down. It's phenomenal. His ability to his video editing and his storytelling is really, really good. The second channel, so I watch a lot of video game content, speed runs, reviews, that sort of stuff. It helps me unwind. I don't play games so much anymore, but I still like to follow the narrative of what's going on there. I found this little YouTuber called Skitty Bitty, and she did her first video, which is a long form video of her review of Tears of the Kingdom, Legend of Zelda. It's 3.5 hours long, and she absolutely crushed it. It was such a phenomenal video. And I was reading her community posts and whatnot, and she's talking about how it's quite overwhelming for her that she got such attention on that video. She doesn't know where she's going to go from here. So if anyone's into video game content and whatnot, I'll put a link to her channel as well, because I think she needs the support and kind words. I think she's feeling very overwhelmed. So I'll put a link to her as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. Yurgi, you had another shout out you wanted to give?
Oh, I was just really kind of kidding, because like I don't really
Oh.
watch true crime anymore, like in my free time, because it's just
sure.
too much for me. I was gonna shout out Drew Binsky, but he has like 1 billion subscribers, but that's who I watch.
Oh, and just to clarify,
Yeah.
if you have any shout outs, it doesn't have to be for other true crime creators. If
Yeah.
there's other channels or anything in particular you wanted to shout out, that's fine too.
Mhm.
But Matt, do you have anybody you'd like to give some attention to?
Yeah, you know what? I was looking around and thinking when you brought this up, because I forgot to bring someone in. And funnily enough, speaking of how, I don't watch true crime in my spare time, like I think pretty much everyone else here, I actually do have a true crime shout out. Someone mentioned Pat Brown in
Yes.
your comments. Scrub, have you tried reaching out to her?
I am trying to search my memory if anybody's ever suggested her to me, and maybe, but I'm not that familiar, I have to say.
That's fine. Well, look, this is a really great idea, because she's an actual criminal profiler, whatever you might think of that discipline. Like, she is trained in it formally, and has a lot of interesting things to say about a lot of things. Sometimes I don't agree with her. Sometimes I do. Sometimes she even brings me around. I mean, I haven't used her for entertainment. I've actually kind of read her and sometimes watched her for research. We happen to agree on the West Memphis 3 case, funnily enough. But the reason I say this could be a really good idea is, although she has that background and is definitely way more qualified than any of us formally, she's still kind of just finding her feet in the YouTube world. 55,000 subs at the moment, so nothing to sniff at, but definitely on the make. So you could actually maybe do something for her, and I think she'd be a very interesting thing to talk person to talk to. She could probably go into much more depth in certain areas than any of us could. So yeah, I think that'd be a big get. Pat Brown.
Yeah, I just got reminded, one of my viewers, Lexi Mad, she actually did recommend Pat Brown to me in the past, but in the hubbub of the last several months and everything else going on, it just
of course,
left my attention. So I apologize, Lexi Mads. I will see what I can do about reaching out to Pat Brown. So thanks, Matt, and thanks, Lexi.
Awesome.
Mr. Black, any projects or anyone you'd like to shout out?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great true crime creator by the name of Mr. Darkside, all one word, kind of like my name, Mr. Black Pasta, but Mr. Darkside. This guy is an incredible guy. He's really pushed through everything. I helped him get set up with a camera and a few other items. When I met him, he had, I think, like 600 subscribers, and he was doing everything from a phone. And once I got him set up with a cheaper Canon, and spend a bit of time on TeamViewer to teach him DaVinci Resolve, this guy just took off. I think he's sitting around 35,000 subscribers, something like that. Such a cool guy. He's got a video on his channel about an alcohol addiction he had, where he actually has videos of himself going through this phase of his life, and he almost died. And it's incredible to see how far he's come. He's been sober for quite a long time now, and he just really inspires me. There's another artist who's not in true crime by the name of Gifted Hands. I covered a little segment on him on my second channel, Cringe Against Humanity, but it wasn't cringy. It was like a timeline breaker for my audience. This guy is amazing. He's a rapper. He's got physical birth defects, and it's just not slowed him down. He's incredible. I really love that guy. And the third thing, that's Gifted Hands, by the way. The third thing I would like to shout out is I've got a documentary that's not true crime. It's a little bit like a lolcow documentary, I guess, over Elisa Jordana. If you look on Cringe Against Humanity, I have a documentary called Jordanaverse.
It was great.
You want to see that. You want to see pure insanity. And my dog Toodles makes a feature in that too. So that's what I've got for you. That's Mr. Darkside, true crime creator. That is Gifted Hands, amazing rapper, and my documentary about Elisa Jordana called Jordanaverse. So
I will be watching
Mr.
that.
Darkside. We talked to
I-
Mr. Darkside like a few years ago. We still like message every now and then. He's a really good dude.
He's really
good dude.
sweet.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Awesome guy.
he's sitting at 50,000 subscribers right now. I'm so
Is he
happy
at
to see how
50
far.
now? Wow.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see how
Okay.
far
Proud.
he's come. He
Proud.
deserves every bit of success he gets.
You have
All
to
right,
see the
well-
documentary of him dealing with his alcoholism. If you ever feel like you can't go on and that you're struggling with something, you just need to go watch that documentary. It's going to change your life. I mean, he puts himself out there. You see him at his worst, and now he's been exercising and training. I mean, he's sober, I think 4 years or something, and he's been training, got his weight down, got his life back. I mean, the guy was going to die, and
Well,
he's just he's an inspiration to me as well. So
Is
All
that
right,
one
well,
called
check him out.
Alcoholism and Drug Use: The Dark Side of My Life?
yes, unreal.
Okay. I'll be sure
Unreal.
to watch that.
all right. Okay, and why not? Let's cap off with one more from Miranda Stone. Holy cats, Miranda. Creators, I'm so glad you decided to make content. Without you, the rest of us are just beady eyes in the middle of the night reading these cases and feeling alone in our curiosity. Ever poetic. Thank you, Miranda Stone. My 17 children that I
Miranda.
know about are all being fed now, thanks to you. All right. Well, everyone, we've gone a little bit over time, but it was perfectly worth it. I want to thank everyone on the panel. I don't know what else to say, given the time zones, given the complexities of everybody's schedules and what you guys do in general. Take the time out to discuss these subjects. I'll have to have like a part 2 at some point, either with a different panel and the same topics for discussion, or additional critiques of some kind. Maybe we'll talk about one overriding one and just make one stream on that. As well, to those of you watching, whether you're present now or in the future watching this, thank you guys so much for taking the time out to take a look at this. Please, if you like this kind of thing, it does help out. I am told, I mean, YouTube has, led me astray before. I am told that it helps out to both like these kind of streams with the little thumbs up button and to leave a comment, and certainly to share this out into the ether, either to other people that you know that enjoy or appreciate true crime, or those that you think might. Because ultimately, especially with smaller channels such as mine and bigger channels even, you guys are the best algorithm. So if there's a content creator out there that you appreciate, share their stuff. And when you are able, especially in my case, and I'm certain for my guests, if you can tag them in your sharing out of their content, please do so, because I know that when I see it, I appreciate it, and I always try to respond directly to those that do. Again, please take a look at the top of the chat box for the donation links to the Trinity Jubilee Center for Misery Machine, and on behalf of Mr. Black Pasta, the ASPCA, for all of the lost puppies out there. And for myself, I don't have it up there, but for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. Don't know when the next stream from this series will be. It all depends on scheduling. I'm attempting to make one of these panel discussions a monthly event, and perhaps individual interviews interspersed in between, but it all comes down to scheduling and time, both mine and my potential guests. So I will see what I can do, and let me know what you think about this one. And as always, go check out the links in the description below of my guests. If you're not already subscribed to their channels or following them on social media, please consider doing so. And when you get there, when you watch their stuff, like it, share it around, and spread the love, as it were. Again, Mr. Black, Matt Orchard, Dave's Lemonade, Yergi, and Drewby of Misery Machine, thank you guys so much for taking the time out tonight to talk with us and discuss these things. Looking forward to the next one. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, I don't know what else to say, either to myself or to the links at the top of the chat box. Thank you guys so much for your generosity. It is appreciated more than you can know, and encourages more of these things to happen in the future. But with that, everyone, my guests included, I hope you have a good rest of your night or morning or middle of the night, wherever you are. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And I'll just ask that my guests stay around for another second or three after I close out, so we can have a little goodbyes. But everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you on the next one. Take care, and bye-bye. All the waves.